Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashterothi, and this is not a CSM interview. Obviously, I've been dedicating a lot of time to CSM interviews, but when I messaged CCP Fozzie and it's like, hey, if you ever want to chat about these event things, let me know. And he's like, I got time today. Guess what? You make time today. So I appreciate you making this going on, coming out here, making this happen. Let's chat. First of all, before anything else, CCP Fozzie, how are you doing?
Me.
Yeah, how you doing?
I'm doing really well today. It's Friday. This was a short week in Iceland. Iceland has Pentecost as as like a day off, so we had Monday off. It's nice. Not as tired as I'd normally be on a Friday.
Awesome. Well, then I might be more tired than you at the moment after my CSM interviews. So this is a welcome break. But you guys had the kindness to give me a mining event that I cared about deeply at the same time as as the CSM stuff was really heating up, which first of all, I appreciate that want for content, right? But I really, really wanted to talk to you about this because these resource wars sites have been near and dear to my heart since the very, very beginning. A lot of people abandoned them. You brought them back. I appreciate you talking about it. So let's go ahead and start from the very beginning. Devlogs aside, what is happening right now when it comes to the Stargate Trailblazer thing?
Yeah, so we've taken some content that had been in the game since 2017, but had never really taken off. There was a few reasons for it. The big one being rewards just weren't in the right place when they originally launched, and then it had kind of been left for a while. It was people were playing it like you, but not a ton. And we saw an opportunity earlier on, actually right at the beginning of the year, to convert these into something that could be a both more widely used by a wider number of players, and that we could turn into a event that gives people something fun to look forward to if they're into mining gameplay on a regular basis. So we took them down from their old form, gave them a little bit of polish, fixed up a couple of UI bugs, changed around the reward structure, and put them back into the game as a start, as a week-long event, although we've actually extended the event for another 2 days, so it'll be a little bit longer than a week. And then we're going to keep bringing them back and keep polishing them, keep improving them as we go, as we get more feedback. It's been really great to get so many eyes on them.
Okay, so, but before we jump, that's interesting. So, a few things there. First of all, the event that was supposed to end on the 1st isn't ending on the 1st.
Yes, it is now ending on the 3rd. So we had originally planned to end it on Tuesday the 1st, but for a couple of reasons. One is that the day one we had a bug that was causing people to not be able to get into the sites. And we also just wanted to give people some more time to kind of get into this content and give us some good eyes on it. We extended it to Thursday. So it's now going to last until downtime on Thursday, June 3rd.
Okay, and that means that also the leaderboards go until then. So people who want to be on the leaderboards have until then to get on them, and people who want to stay on the leaderboards need to stick with it until then, right?
Yes, indeed. So yeah, the top players. Some people will not have read the patch notes. The top players who contribute to each of these constellations are going to get their names on new monuments. They're going to go beside the new Stargates. We're creating some new Stargates that are going to connect Empire space to sometimes other empires, sometimes other areas, basically places where each empire in the lore is really interested in getting a new Stargate created for their own reasons. And we're tying that into this event. So the constellations where the event is running are the constellations around each of these Stargate locations. And at each one of these Stargates, there will be permanent monuments that list the top 10 players and the top 5 player corporations who contributed to the event. That's going to be measured by loyalty points gained by those players. So we've got a leaderboard on the forums, and yeah, it'll be the snapshot taken at downtime on the 3rd. That'll be the measurement of that.
And ongoing leaderboard is updated by hand by you every day. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So what we're doing right now is I'm just running a DB query and putting it up once a day. This is something that we get a snapshot of data at midnight or up until midnight each night UTC. And so I've just been updating that manually. You mentioned this when we were talking a bit about it on Nth Dimensional stream yesterday.
Hold up. I think it's happening. Hold up. 1 second. Glorification of the fit, mortification of the unfit. CCP, you are glorified. Thank you so much for that raid. Thank you for showing up. It is good to see you. We are hanging out with CCP Fozzie, and we are talking about the newest event that is going on. We've just been kind of introducing it. The biggest takeaway, oh my gosh, okay, now that sound is going away until that manages to figure out how to not be disastrous every time. But thank you all for joining me and joining us down the rabbit hole, which is EVE Online. But we were just talking, and I think that the biggest takeaway that I need to cover to catch everybody up is that the mining event, which started a few days ago, was supposed to end on the 1st, but it has been extended for 2 days. So it now ends on the 3rd. That is, it gives you more time to get involved, more time to try to win, and more time that you got to try to fight to hold your spot. Going back to that, the expert system, there's an expert system that was part of this too, that give everybody who logs in during these events the ability to use expert or the
be able to use
expedition frigates,
the Tech 2 mining frigates.
Right,
yeah.
the 2 Tech 2 mining frigates. Everybody can use them. Tech 2, even alphas. And this is very similar to what you did with the Grand Prix with interceptors. Everybody can use interceptors. When there's a competitive thing, you give everyone the ability to do the thing to be competitive. So that being said, they only last 4 days. By extending the time, does that make it more difficult for like alphas? If somebody wanted to take it as an alpha, now they may not be able to.
Yes, it definitely means that people who are relying on that expert system, it's a smaller percentage of the total time. The Venture is also an excellent choice for this event, especially for the limited sites, which don't even allow the Tech 2 frigates in. I'd say we aren't necessarily always going to use expert systems like this for events that have competition. It's interesting. I actually hadn't even really thought about the fact that these are both these 2 events, the Grand Prix and this Stargate Trailblazers event, both have a competition element to them. We approach it as if it's a event that has a distinct set of ships that you would use for it that players might not already have trained, and it just kind of fits well with an expert system, so it doesn't require too many skill points to get into it. We've been trying to put these expert systems into the daily logins just to give everybody a cool opportunity to try it out, and they can do it. There's a bunch of ways to keep playing with it afterwards, right? You never require, like, just in the same ways you don't need to have an interceptor to run the track for the Grand Prix, you don't need to have Tech 2 frigates to run the Resource Wars mining expedition sites.
That is a good point. But however people slice it, like I have some concerns about expert systems for sale, and just like a lot of the player base does. This isn't about that. But one of the things that I really like, and everyone I've talked to, sometimes I have to explain it all out to them, but everyone agrees that this is a awesome use of expert systems where it gives everyone a temporary opportunity to play with a specific frigate as a way of making short, different periods of time, which is really what the event system, the events team has been working on as like a high level goal. It seems for the last couple of years, events really seem to be about creating short-lived rules that we can now increasingly rely on to come. So like, for instance, the Easter event, and the ability to get implants out of pods, or, I can't think of another example right off the top of my head, but these like short Halloween event, increased drop rates.
Increase, yeah, loot drop rates, increase warp speeds in certain areas. Yeah, we've been doing a lot of these. 'Cause it's kind of mutators on the Eve universe a little bit. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So like when we're talking about Eve being a dynamic game and Eve being an ever-shifting game, the fact that like it is that way temporally through these cycles, I think is has been really successful. I know that CCP for a long time really resisted the idea of seasonal events and holiday events and that kind of stuff. Um, Clearly, there's been an attitude change in the last few years. Do you feel like that is successful? Events have seen many iterations. Do you feel like this is now like? Do you feel like you're nailing it now?
I think they have been quite successful. Obviously, there's always stuff I think we can improve them even more, but I've been really happy about the events we've been able to put together over the last year. The team that I'm currently a part of, Team Raw, we were formed just a little over a year ago to take over some of the shorter term event content that Team Event Horizon had been running, but then they were moved over to focus on the Triglavian Invasion, which was a bit of a different format of event. And I'm really happy with the content that we've been able to put together. I think our key goal is to make sure there's always new, interesting, different things to look forward to in Eve, right? Eve is a game that is incredibly diverse, and there's a huge amount of stuff you can do in it, but it's really easy to get stuck in a rut where you do the same thing all the time. And we want to encourage people to try new things.
Yeah, and these have I would say that these have been extremely successful in doing so. At least they have enabled me as an alliance leader to push these things and continually drive for those who are willing to. And the nice thing is that often these sites end up being fairly rewarding for those who do push the envelope. I have a question from Commander Cottonfluff. Team Raw as in Raw or Raw as in Ra the sun god?
Ra the Sun God. So when we formed this team, there's like different teams have had our teams have internal names. You often don't hear about the specific ones. Some will come out like I think most people are aware of Team Talos, which is the team that's doing a lot of balance changes right now. But yeah, Raw, when we were formed, we were picking an internal name for ourselves and really wanted to do something that was based around cycles, around things that are recurring and that have a reliable cycle to them. And Ra being the sun god, the myths of the just daily sun cycle, it fit really well. Yeah,
The entire myth of
that's the reasoning for that.
the entire myth of Ra is his journey. Like there's this whole long story, but it's
Yeah, the
basically
death and
just his
rebirth.
his
Yeah.
journey across the sun, across the sky and through the underworld. So yeah, it makes total sense, especially since that kind of feels like how Eve is sometimes, right? Like there's times that you're rising up in the sky, and there are some times where you're trudging through the underworld just trying to make it back to the surface again. So absolutely. Also, I want to get back. CCP Convict just gifted a tier 1 sub to CCP Alpha. This isn't even the first time that he's done this. CCP Convict, an absolute treasure of our community. I love gifted subs. I love being able to say, like, you're a member, you get the cool stuff, and then he gives it to CCP Fozzie. CCP Convict is
Thanks,
just
Convict.
I can't like. I was just talking to somebody who's a streamer from somebody else in the other community, and he was talking about how their game's community team, who shall not be named, were like kind of toxic. And I was like, oh man, let me tell you all about how awesome our guys are. CCP Convict, thank you so much. How do we celebrate all of this? There's only one way: by showing us your clades. All right, enough of that. Back to you, CCP Fozzie. You do a fairly decent job too. No,
Thanks.
on the subject of invasions, though, you mentioned the invasions, what the other team went off and did. Invasions was a triumph in both using the old mechanics, starting with like incursions and working your way towards this kind of crazier new thing, what it ended up at. It was a interesting way to unfold things like Poshvin. But more importantly, I think that the invasions did something that everything else up until that point had like been an unfulfilled promise, which is the ability to side with one side or the other and have that affect things. Now, some people will be upset about how the details of how it is. I'm not getting into that argument right now. But the point of the matter is that in the Sancha incursions, people tried to side with Sancha. CCP straight up said that they didn't expect it. Every step of the way, conflict has been a part of it. Invasions finally got us there. It showed us that real conflict could come out of it, and whole new stories have come out of that. A lot have come out of that.
Yeah, dude.
Bringing out these gates in areas that are more dangerous, and more importantly, bringing out gates that could theoretically be controversial. I want to stress that you never implied that these could be stopped. And there have been criticisms even or about like the wording that you use, but it's like leave your mark on the sky, stars is what I think, or something like that, right?
Leave your mark on the universe, I think it was. Yeah.
And
It definitely could have been clearer, but yeah, the from my perspective, what I've been trying to get across with that had been the monuments.
I
The idea
argue
to
that
have,
my name on a monument is the definition of my mark on the universe. So I would say that you spoke truly about it. In fact, I have publicly said before, and I'll say it right now, any blame on CCP, I would throw it at me more than anybody else. I'm one of the guys that are the tinfoilers and all that stuff, and I've been actively, because I wanted to, in the event that it was, I will admit, I had a sinking suspicion as I started to see how the pieces were lining up that it might not end up this way. But by that point, it was too late. But like, I knew that if it was, that would be something interesting that I needed people to know about ahead of time, and that's why I went for it. So I apologize for people getting hyped up, but it wasn't CCP that said it. CCP was always coy about it. Always, always, always. And in fact, the night before Tuesday happened, as I was saying that it wouldn't be on Tuesday and it would be on Friday because I've got it figured out. So obviously at that point, still hadn't got it figured out. I was like, or this has been the longest April Fool's Day joke ever by CCP on me. And, whatever. So we'll unpack some of that stuff, but I do want to give you an opportunity to speak about the conflict piece of it.
yeah, and I don't think you need to feel bad about that. That's something like your tinfoiling is always really exciting, and you're never going to be like when you're making these kind of guesses, you're never going to know the same things we know behind the scenes, right? So you don't need to worry about not guessing the future correctly every time. And those you mentioned April Fool's joke. This kind of was the longest April Fool's joke we've ever done because the joke was that we announced we were doing the gate to Stain and then actually ended up doing it. While letting people think that it was not going to happen.
Right.
So that part I'm quite happy with.
Yeah, and that every step of the way, and that was the funniest part about it because like when it first came out on April Fools, on April Fools, all of CCP was like, "What are you talking about? It's not a joke. We're totally serious." And then like even afterwards, you were like, "I can neither confirm nor deny." And at a certain point, all of us were like, "Hey, April Fools is over. You could like knock off the shtick," and then like more stuff came out about Celis Agard and building the Stargates, and I was like, oh my god, they're going to actually do this, aren't they? But that actually brings up another point, which is that in the lore, they actually had some time where they tried to find the correct resonance points for especially the Solitude Gate, and the fact that they are in points of conflict. Was there ever a time in the design? It felt like there was a desire for this to be more. And ultimately, you had to concede based on the actual design of the sites, because not having a lockout would just make the sites not work, because the lockout is part of the constraints of the puzzle. So it isn't about stopping people from disrupting it. It's about stopping people from gaming the system. So given that you can't do that, it doesn't work. You can't actually do a conflict. Was it something that you wanted to do that you ultimately had to just give up on, or was it never part of the plan?
The process for this is this all, of course, we're doing all this well ahead of time. Like this was months ago. We knew that we wanted to bring back the Resource Wars content, these mining expeditions, and in our discussions about what else is going to be going on in the world at this time, especially discussions between some of the designers on my team and CCP Delegate Zero, who is one of our narrative designers, who anyone who's familiar, keeps up with the lore, will be very familiar with. the idea came up of, hey, there's these reasons that new Stargates are something that the empires would be interested in. Especially, we had already laid the seeds for the Solitude Gate in the presidential election storylines. We knew that there was going to be both desire in universe and out of universe for a new connection between the Caldari state and the Atmar Empire. That was going to be a high priority, both for the characters in game and for people out of game, to have a more interesting choice of how to make that travel. And we had some reasons that I won't entirely go into right now, but you'll kind of discover them later if you keep paying attention, to want to increase some connectivity with the Sanctum constellation. So we knew we wanted to put a new connection directly from the Minotaur Republic to Sanctum, and a Gate to Stain was going to be kind of hilarious. So we knew this stuff was all stuff we wanted to do, and the that discussion led us into, well, why don't we just do them at the same time, tie them together thematically? At that point, we did have a discussion about whether we would want to do something that had some kind of like player activity impact directly on how they would appear. Our main thing that we discussed at that time was doing it similar to what we had done with the Tech 3 destroyers, where you'd get to choose the order they appear in. Um, that was considered for a little bit. The main reason that at the time we decided to move away from that was that the layouts that we had for these gates were not going to be symmetrical between the four empires. It was not going to feel like there was an equal set of choices. Some of them were all in high sec, some of them are in low sec and null sec. One of them is right beside Jita, which unsurprisingly is by far the most heavily run constellation. So we were worried that it would have felt like a non-choice. It was kind of it would have been guaranteed that the first one completed would have been the Kadari one. It would have been a guarantee the second one completed would have been the Mimitar one. And then it would have just kind of been a competition between Amar and Glente for third and fourth place.
Was it
So
ever
that's why we shied away from that at the beginning.
was it ever a consideration to prevent one of the gates at all?
Not seriously at the time. Obviously, this is something after now we've seen how much kind of desire there is for this. It's something that we're going to look and see whether we can do more things like this in the future. But in this case, we knew that for game reasons, other than maybe the Stain Gate, we kind of we knew we needed all of these at some point. So it wasn't super appropriate for us to go that particular direction.
That makes sense. But knowing
the last
that,
thing we wanted to do was give people kind of a choice that seems like a fake choice or something like that, right? We want to make sure that if we're giving people a choice, it's a real impactful choice they can make that is somewhat fair.
Ironically, by making them asymmetrical, that's what convinced me that this was like some sort of like 60 chess. Because I was like, there's a different reason for each one, right? Like, will you fight because of a lore reason? Will you fight to screw over the gankers traveling to Heck, or or in the choke point there? Will you fight to re-stitch Amar and Jita together? Will you fight for the memes, right? Like, what will people fight for? What will people die for? And I was really down with that. But that is a classic example of, like, as a designer, you're mostly focusing on having a really cool event to show off your revamp of Resource Wars. And I, as a forest or as a trees for forest guys, only see that as like my mind races with opportunities and possibilities, and I'm not limited by these things. So, but the good news is that now goes in, as you pointed out, the interest in that was demonstrated, and so that will feed into preferably, hopefully, future design in the same way that incursions,
yes,
or what happened in incursions fed into invasions design. Also, Joachim just gifted a tier 1 sub to CCP Aurora. Thank you so much. Once again, let us celebrate by showing us your clades. Those who sub get all of the not all. This thing has gotten out of control, but many of the corporations involved in the current precursor crisis: SOE, SOCT, Thucker, Drifters, Jove, several of the corporations, including my own Convocation of Empyreans and Arataka Research Consortium. Thank you so much for that. As well as the Triglavian Collective, Edencom, and all 3 Triglavian clades. Banana sandwich clade. I demand my name on the banana of Brisk Ball. Were you watching the stream, by the way, CCP Fozzie? Total aside.
I've only seen bits and pieces.
Go back. First of all, go back and watch Brisker Ball's section on the stream.
I've seen the clip that you tweeted. I wasn't watching this, or I guess I had the stream muted and I was doing some other things at that point. But I have seen the clip that you tweeted, and that was hilarious.
Yeah. I don't think I need to say anything more then. All right, but back on track. Like, so knowing all of that, and knowing that the Triglavian community in particular feels personally proud of the damage that they did during incursions by taking Niarja. One CSM candidate, Maldavius in particular. What do you say to him that you're undoing their work and stitching it back together?
We definitely the making sure that we didn't just completely undo that work was a big part of deciding these routes. So, for instance, we were never going to create a short high sec connection between Jita and Amar as part of this, because that would have just been undoing the effects of the invasion. We didn't want that to be an equivalent. So what we created was something that is fairly short connection, but has a low sec jump in it, which makes a huge difference for trade, obviously, but maybe a bit less of a difference for the empires in the universe itself, in the lore. And so that was the reasoning we went. We knew when we made the goal to create this new Caldari gate between Caldari and Amar. Before we decided what systems we're going to actually connect, we set ourselves the goal of it should be a short enough connection that it makes an interesting choice compared to the Silk Road, but it has to go through low sec so that there's that trade-off. We weren't going to be creating a new, shorter than the Silk Road high sec connection.
Right. And I the players I've talked to and listened to talking about this, I think have completely dismissed how important this is, or have like minimized it in one way or another. Because like one of the things I often hear is that nobody's going to use it because it's too dangerous or whatever. Anybody who remembers what Niarja was like when it was still nullsec knows that that's absolutely not true. Anybody who lives in Raincer knows that is absolutely not true. And so this actually, in my opinion, creates a very interesting risk versus reward and creates more dynamic situations. Whereas before, Dodixie was very difficult to be an active, alive market hub. It is now technically easier to bring things from Jita to Dodixie than it is from Jita to Amar. There's a lot of other reasons why Amar remains an active trade hub, but now it is difficult to get things from from those two trade hubs, and easy to get between that and the other trade hub comparatively. Uedama is now comparatively safe. And so that, not to get too deep into it, but even that little bit, you can see how much more complex of a system that is compared to Niarja and Uedama both being the 0.5 choke point between these two trade hubs.
Yeah.
So, okay. And then, of course, Stain Guy is going to be biomassing now. Are you going to? I don't know if the biomassing has happened yet. I don't think so. Are you going to attend his thing?
I think, yeah, I'll attend it if he invites, if he makes it available for me to attend. That seems like a fun thing. I mean, obviously, I had no idea he was going to biomass that particular character, as part of this. Although, of course, we knew that character's gimmick was going to be
I think that was always his shtick.
We created the gate.
I think that was always his shtick, that he was going to biomass himself. But that being said,
I knew it was always a stick to ask for it, but I actually didn't know that he had talked about biomassing before. But I mean, obviously, up to him. He's got a bunch, but like he is not going to be bout by that loss. I'm sure he's got other options to play with.
And so this guy has for years been posting on Reddit, both in memes and in long-winded sound reasoning, why this low sec gate to Stain that you are creating should have always been there, and it is an absolute violation of all things good game design that the Stain gate has not existed up until this point. When this happened on the thread that he announced that he was biomassing or whatever, I was like, will we ever know who this masked hero was? And he responded with, "We have spoken many times, winky face." So in the event that you are out there, Stain Guy, I will say this: you may biomass yourself, but as CCP Fozzie has now posted twice, it apparently no one has actually had the balls to go to Stain and put their name on the fact that that monument is there. You know, that gate is now there with their name on it. Stain Guy's name
Stain Guy
needs
should
to
definitely
be
get in on that.
on
Yeah.
the Stain gate before he biomasses.
I'll say this: if Stain Guy is looking for fleet members to help him run some of these sites in Stain, I will go out there on one of my player character, on my outed player character, and help get him onto that monument.
Yeah.
Because he definitely should do that. It is. There have been people that have run the sites now that they just hadn't up until, or actually, the honest truth is, up until midnight last night, the only person to have run a site in one of these sites in Stain was CCP Fozzie, because I ran one of my dev characters to make sure everything was working.
Somebody gotta.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the sites themselves, because as you said, these were a feature that came from 2017. Were you part of the original feature design team?
Not for this feature, no.
Okay.
I was working at CCP at the time, but I was working on other stuff.
So, like, try to think of what you've been told about it. No. So what is like?
Well, I'd say we have, like, obviously we're all kind of, we have the design documentation, we're aware of it, but also the team that I'm currently on, Team Raw, we actually do have members of the original, or a member of the original design team for the Resource Wars feature in CCP Affinity.
Oh, awesome! Yay! I like CCP Affinity.
Yeah, she's great.
She's good people. And her drifters kill people. So, anywho, that being said, what's the point of these mining sites? Because I think that a lot of people that haven't necessarily run them and pulled them apart, I don't think they truly really appreciate them for what they are. Some miners think that it's a place to go get resources. Some people see it as like just a lame new event site thing, like something like that, adding hacking sites to previous events. What are these Resource Wars sites, and what are their point?
They're basically like a mining challenge. They are in a way to mining what things like the low level incursion sites are to standard, like, shooting NPC PvE content. They're meant to be they're meant to be best in groups. Obviously, you can solo all of them if you really know what you're doing, and some of them quite easily. But they are group mining challenges, and they even give you bonuses for doing them faster. They're timed. You mine ore in the site and deposit it in NPC orcas that are in there. There's NPCs shooting at you. There's NPCs defending you. And the design is to make sure that there is some good stuff to do for a couple of different roles. You can be support. You can remote rep people. You can give gang links. You can also kill the hostile NPCs, and you can do the mining itself. And together as a group, you try to get the orcas filled as quickly as possible, and then you get a standard completion, bronze, silver, or gold medal, depending on how fast you do it.
Right. So this is actually about, and you get just raw payout for it based on success.
Yes, you get ISK and LP and standings, although at the moment we've taken away the standings gating, so the standings don't do a lot.
Right. There's this vestigial standing system that isn't really a piece of it, but there is ISK and LP. And while there has been some like a lot of focus on the LP, and we'll talk about that in a second, I do want to reinforce the fact that the ISK payout is its own reward. And honestly, depending
Really
as you get scaled up to the highest levels, we were running criticals last night, and we were doing the math, and it's like we can do criticals in 6 to 7 minutes, and that is a grand total of like 80 million ISK payout for our group. Because this is the part that's key. Just like emerging conduits and other things like that, the payout is to everyone that has contributed evenly. So you can solo it, but if you don't have 4 people, you're literally just not making, you don't make 4 times as much money if you solo it. You make less because you do it slower, so you get a less score. If you bring 3 more people, then everyone gets paid out and you get gold. So
yeah,
I fear that too many people that are trying to do this the normal Eve mentality way of either soloing it or multi-boxing it are becoming frustrated with it, because it's not just something you knock out and just grind. These are things that every single site you like work to do better. As you said, it's a challenge, and it takes a lot to get gold. Like even if you have a fully stuffed team, we still, I don't know if we've gotten a gold yet in criticals. We nail silver pretty
Gold on
much every time.
criticals is really hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is rough.
It is
Oh,
very tough to get gold on the
I
criticals.
have been corrected by 3 foot, which is he's on 2 of the leaderboards right now. Both one of the high sec ones, which is pretty impressive, and also one of the top of our low sec crew, because the Convocation of Empyreans are in fact building the gate to solitude as per the president's wishes. So we took on the more difficult low sec challenge, not the most difficult null sec challenge, although we have been tempted by that, but it was a good place for us to do this in a way that it's like we chose the harder challenge, not even because it was a better reward, but it made it so that we knew that if we were able to do it, we could win. And so we made a shot for it, and so far so good. Apparently they've now gotten a gold critical, so yay. But
that is really impressive. That is something that I have never actually done. I've gotten gold on majors in our playtesting, but I've never actually gotten a gold on critical.
So that being said, I really want to break down a couple of these mechanics for people, and I wouldn't mind going into these sites and show them off, but unfortunately, like you can't do that without disrupting the site itself. So we're just gonna keep on looking at these stars and seeing them.
Considering you should probably have a bunch of like, I mean, I don't know whether you got a venture available, but it is pretty easy to solo the limiteds, and there's probably a lot of them around because there's a lot more limiteds spawning, or the miners too. Like,
have you tried to run these sites in the low sec area without stuffing it full? Because it doesn't work out well usually.
Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah.
we finished a site, and 3 foot actually warped out at the end, and a Gnosis warped in. The site was over, and it was just waiting there. And as soon as one of us left without the other ones, it was in there, and everybody had to scram. It was anyway. Okay, so I want to break down some of these mechanics since I got you here. One of the things that's confused a lot of people is that these rocks don't have very much ore in any given rock, like an infinitesimal amount. And some people have seen this, I've even seen it outright called as a bug. You want to explain how the rocks are a piece to the design?
Yeah, so the rocks are dynamically spawned, so there's a bit of randomness in them, in their size, and their position is dynamically set up. But yes, each individual rock is really small. So if you want to do well in these sites, you need to use a trick that back in the day used to be more of a common thing in mining for people that are experienced miners, but is a bit less so now, which is short cycling. Where with a mining laser, unlike most modules in Eve, if you run it for only part of its cycle and you deactivate it partway through, you get that percentage of the ore. So if you run a mining cycle for one half of its time, when you turn it off, you'll pull in half of the ore that you would have if you had a full cycle. And this is obviously something that is used in normal mining for when there is just not much left in a certain rock, usually combined with survey scanners. But in these sites, it is an absolutely crucial trick to be able to pull.
Yeah, a couple pieces to that. First of all, mining lasers don't actually operate like normal modules in that way. Like most modules can't be shut off halfway through. Mining lasers can.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why is because if you ever get outside of the range of your optimal, then the entire cycle is wasted. So you can cut it off early as you're drifting out as a way of like getting what you have left and packing up and going. Or if you know there's only a little bit left, you can kind of nick at it until it's gone, or however you do it. The other piece to this though is that every single time you turn on the cycle, it takes some capacitor. It takes its entire the activation cost. So while you can short cycle, you immediately run into the problem of capping yourself out if you do it too often or even just too aggressively. And so one of the pieces of this puzzle is understanding your ship and how much of the cycle you need to go per rock. And the thing I really like about this, some people have complained about it, but the reason why I like this is because when we were designing these builds and people were like throwing on mining laser upgrades and all that stuff, I was like, or like trying to min-max stuff, I'm like, none of that matters. Because the difference between a mining laser upgrade and a non-mining laser upgrade is infinitesimally small compared to the many execution mistakes that you are going to make while running these sites. And to the point where even if you made that difference, you won't even, your resolution as a pilot won't even like see the difference of a mining laser upgrade versus a non-mining laser upgrade until you're like playing it like peak top game, right? So it's all about execution and coordination, because as you go up in tiers, there's more and more orcas that you need to fill, and they're spread out. And so this isn't even something that can be easily multi-boxed, because you have to be in multiple different places, mining multiple different rocks. And if you step on each other, it's a big problem. That makes the
Yeah, you
coordination
definitely don't
between
want to be
people.
mining the same rocks.
Right. And that makes that reveals kind of the biggest part of the fun of these kinds of sites, which is the interplay, right? You can do themselves, but doing them with other people is the more exciting, fun way to do it. And as you go up in scale, allows you to get access those more difficult tiers and get bigger rewards for everybody. And I always really liked that about the feature. But when it first came out, it did so poorly that higher tier never even got accessed, really, by a lot of people.
Yeah, the fact that there were standings requirements made a big difference there too. You had to play a
Yes.
lot to get into the higher tiers. Yeah.
Right. It would have taken a big commitment to get deep. And when people saw the reward structure then, they just didn't. And it was funny because it was almost emotional to us last night, because me and Pockets did Resource Wars on Sissy and put it on Pockets. We did it together and we recorded it and we edited them together way back in the day. And this was going to be what Malro was founded on. We were going to run Resource Wars, bring in people, have it be cooperative play, teach them how to play, send them over to Aderon Robotics where they could do faction warfare. And so for years, it's funny because whenever I get told that I was white knighting or something like that, I go, no, Resource Wars exists. I've already been, shot down. I've already been embittered. I've already had my stuff stolen from me. And so now, like last night, I was playing with somebody else from Aderon who comes from back in the day. And he's like, I need to go to bed, but can we please put together a critical? And like at the time, 3 Foot was like, we've been running criticals all day. It's like, well, I mean, it's kind of a pain in the butt. And it's like, no, man, you don't understand. And like I explained to everybody, it's like, he hasn't been waiting to do a critical for 2 hours. He's been waiting to do a critical for 4 years. And that's pretty crazy. So what was the feeling about from CCP about Resource Wars, how it went down in 2017, and what to do about it?
It was really complicated. And this is one of those ones where it is a bit of a challenge to like figure out what to say without like you don't want to, you want to be accurate, but also there's just some stuff that's complicated internal stuff. But yeah, there was a lot of work that got put into it back in the day, and largely like the biggest reason it didn't take off was the rewards. And this is something that like there was a lot of knowledge that was going to be an issue going
Right.
into it. And then I think it was something that everyone was a little bit afraid to touch for a while. And so part of why we were able to work on it and bring it back now is just enough time has passed.
Yeah.
That made it easier.
Good. That probably does help. And I do remember when it got taken away, you even said it's going to be brought back for something else. And people just didn't believe you because it was like, okay, well, I guess it's gone now.
I don't blame them. But I'm glad we were able to follow through on that. And I wrote that patch note, and that's one of the things I like. Obviously, you're never going to be able to be accurate all the time, but I do pride myself on like trying to follow through as much as possible. So yeah, I wouldn't have put that in the patch notes unless we were really confident we were going to be able to bring it back. Partly because the content is. There's obviously things that can be improved on it, and we're going to keep improving it. But the content is really good overall, and we knew that there was relatively low hanging fruit that we could improve it with.
Well, there's always going to be haters, but I personally appreciated that little comment because that was enough. That was the candle that I was able to hold in my little hut to shelter me from the rain. In fact, honestly, that was more encouraging to me than prior to that, because when the agency was revamped, it wasn't included in the agency, which meant you couldn't even find the sites anymore if you wanted to. And so then I had this awkward time where people would come and like, what are these sites? And I'd explain it to them and then be like, oh, that's cool. And I'm like, oh, but yeah, okay. And I'd like start to explain it to them. I was like, yeah, well, you could do this, but then you'd have to get standings, and then you'd have to get other people to also get standings, and then you'd have to find them. And like at some point, it's just like, I guess not. So like, even just having them taken away with the promise that they're going to be treated correctly was so much better than just having them be left as a vestigial kind of non-site, especially for an invasion runner that warped to far too many minor expeditions or whatever they're called, as opposed to minor conduits. But going back to the mechanics a little bit, one thing that I wanted to ask in particular is the gold rock. This is, I think, one of the things that are the least understood of the situation. Do you care to give us some insight as to the gold rock?
It was, so I know more about the design of what it was meant to do than I do about the actual math behind it. Although that's something that we need to take a closer look at.
Well, we don't even know what it is or what
As
it
we
does.
explore
At this
that.
point, people think it
The
explodes. Somebody thought it like summons clone soldiers. Like, what is the gold
No, it doesn't
rock?
summon clone soldiers. It is meant to, so it in the design documents, it is meant to be a something that is worth mining, that helps provide something a bit more dynamic, as like something you can react to in the site. Like, okay, this is the extra reward that's popped up. Um, and off the top of my head, I should have looked this up beforehand. I do not remember the exact math behind it, but yes, it is supposed to be like you mine it, and it's a better rock to mine.
But after a period of time, it explodes.
I think I believe it's after it's mined out, but
Hmm.
uh, I may need to get back to you on that. It is that's one area that we didn't change anything related to that in this new relaunch of the site. So I would need to dig through some of the old docs to get the exact details.
Well, hopefully soon we can all learn together. Because no, seriously. So that's another one. Is that? Can you explain? Were you aware of this clone soldier issue, first of all, or is this the first you're hearing about it?
The fact that that asteroid NPCs will spawn in the sites.
Specifically, clone
Uh,
soldiers, and because you moved them into low sec.
Yeah, so it'll be like any of the asteroid NPCs can do it, but yes, that includes the clone soldiers, and in Stain it includes the nullsec asteroid NPCs. And yeah, so it's the systems for those, the systems that spawn asteroid NPCs, they just spawn around any asteroid. If they see an asteroid, it's like, let's give a chance to spawn some NPCs, and so that means that like people that have been around a long time, and especially in low sec and nullsec, might be aware of this already. But you can get these NPCs at the rocks that come out of moon mining. You can get them out of almost any mission that has rocks in it. Can get extra NPCs from the asteroid belt spawn sometimes. Yeah, it's a thing.
So
It's not like something that was done specifically for resource wars, but it's just part of the always there CCP, like Eve code base.
So what I'm hearing is that anyone who's really interested and is just the chutzpahist pilot around could go do officer farming in Stain
Yeah,
right
you
now.
could absolutely get an off. I mean, obviously it's a rare spawn, but yes, it is 100% possible to get a officer spawn in the Stain resource force sites.
I think that would be bad for the people trying to finish the site.
Would be a challenge because you're limited on what ships. In a critical, you can bring in battleships, but you might not have one around. You can bring in battle cruisers and the criticals and the majors, but yeah, that it would be tough with the ships that you probably have brought into one of these sites. That would be tough. Yeah.
So that actually brings up another point, which is that these sites have a bunch of rats, and they're diamond rats, which actually doesn't
Yep.
necessarily denote them as being like super powerful. It just denotes what level of sophistication of the AI they have, more or less. Is that correct?
Yeah.
They're like, hey, these are not your typical mission guys. Um,
Yeah, these are significantly weaker than the NPCs that you get from, say, shooting a mining op
right.
in the asteroid belts. Yeah.
Which is why the clone soldiers end up causing such a problem, because they're scaled at a totally
Yeah.
different level and they just WTF pwn. Anywho, so the and also you have rats on both sides, so like there's allies that you can
Yes.
work with and you can rep them. And at higher levels, you definitely need to deal with the rats enough to bring like Logi or something like that for most groups. At least that's what we found. But while it seems like there is this combat component, right? Like you get points for combat and all that sort of stuff. Um, the combat doesn't do anything to advancing success, and therefore it feels like any any resources I allocate towards combat, it's almost like a trick. It's like you're talking about false choice. Like, why would
You
I?
kind of just need to do the minimum. Yeah, the minimum to keep your people alive is the way it works with the current sites.
But yet the agency tells me to kill 10 of them.
Yeah, we put that in. It's a good point. That's, I think, something that we could improve for future iterations of events like this. We put that in because it's something that is a rule that is like supported, and we want to make sure that you're getting like that you can get the agency points, no matter which, or not no matter which role, but through at least as many of the roles as we could easily support.
Right.
But yeah, it is a good point that it is a much less valuable role generally, or a role that you want fewer people to be running.
Well,
Um,
the nightmare scenario was the one that we almost like fell into, which is that so we didn't in the first day that we didn't know what was going to win the gate. We didn't know what your metric was, and so I guessed it was points on the track. Right? It was for the event who gets the most points. That way you could give all of the different value. Which first of all gave us aneurysms because that meant that we had to like always click claim reward and like it was a serious deal. Which that's a whole nother topic that we could go into afterwards if you wanted. But without that, but we found out later that it was simply LP, which means it's tied to how well you run the sites. I was bringing faction warfare dudes to come and do this. We were having all sorts of ideas about how we can do the combat and the mining sites in order to like maximize our points by doing both things at the same time, only to have it all fall apart. The nightmare scenario was that I was thinking about like what happens if succeeding in the site doesn't actually matter. If we just kill enough rats, that's its own objective. But because of all of this concerns about like people disrupting the sites or not intentionally not finishing the site as being considered an exploit, the new concern was, will people validly try to treat the site as a combat site and thus be intentionally not finishing the sites and have that be a problem ultimately? So I guess all of that is to say, like, why is the combat component of the site featured at all?
Honestly, just because we wanted to cover as many bases as we could because you can absolutely finish the track just by mining, right? Like if you're running these sites and you're mining, you'll get to the end of the track before the event finishes. But we wanted to try to, in the same ways we put like both the hacking tracks and the combat tracks on something like the Encapsulator Day One. We wanted to cover as many of the bases as we easily could. But I think it's a very good point that by putting it there, we give players the signal that it is unequal weighting to mining, and the content doesn't reflect that. And so that's a case where we essentially are communicating information between the lines that is incorrect to players, and we definitely can improve that for future ones.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit about this and talk about like the physical structure of the events. I've talked, faction warfare is a love of mine. And one of the things I've suggested many times for like how to revitalize faction warfare is the idea of like a campaign that brings specific focus to a specific constellation in order to like increase the activities there. So that way people know like if you want content this weekend, this is the place to go to content this weekend. This idea of like it being constellation bound seems to be a trend that follows in what events have seemed to be, where the host empires, host pirate faction seems to be where the better sites are, to kind of not just highlight the pirate factions, but also make certain smaller sections of space temporarily more valuable than others. This is a much, much more concentrated view of that. Is this part of the continued experimentation of changing space dynamically? And how do you feel that this particular experiment is going?
So I think you're absolutely right that the goal of both, when we have a really concentrated area of gameplay like we do for, say, the hunt, for instance, for a site where we have the best sites in just one area, and when we put these in just one constellation, our goal is to try to put players into contact with each other, and that can mean a number of things in low sec and null sec. In Stargate Trailblazers, it can mean competition in PvP. In high sec, it lends itself well to people forming pickup groups, essentially, which is obviously not as efficient as a group of people you're starting with. But this, as far as Eve content goes, this is some of the best content for pickup groups out there when you're running in high sec. So that was part of the goal too, was concentrating people together. So just you'll run into other players and work together with them. Maybe you'll then want to like move on to other sites together with them. That's part of why the original feature and this feature still has a chat channel. You can join and feel free to chat in when you're in the site. I don't think we can necessarily say for sure that that's going to be something that always leads itself to other like a dynamic system in Eve. I think there's a lot of potential there, but definitely can't make any promises. But it is something we're really happy with how it's worked out with it for events at least. And so I can't really speak to the other stuff, but I can speak to events, and it's something we definitely plan on to keep using for events.
Awesome. Awesome.
In fact, I'll say, I mean, we can talk a little bit about this more later too, but one thing that we've already let people know with the Foundation quadrant announcement, the current quadrant that we're in, a big part of it is going to be an increased emphasis on the Empire specific holiday events that we've used for a couple of years now, and we did a little bit more for them last year. And we're doing more for them this year. And as part of that, we're trying to do things that highlight each Empire space. So you'll see it first with Federation Day, and then you'll see it biggest with Liberation Day, because that's going to be the one that is the one we put the most effort into this year. And then next year it'll be a different one we put more effort into. Yeah, I think there's some cool stuff that you'll see coming for that, where we just basically highlight that area of space and provide bonuses for just being in the Galente Federation in Empire space during that event, or in the Minmatar Republic during the Liberation Day event, stuff like that.
Ooh, that's very, very interesting. Okay, so almost like the weather effects, or like the observatories and Edencom systems, blanketing
Yeah, yeah.
system-wide effects.
Or like when we've done like bonuses that apply just to low sec or just to wormhole space in the past. We're going to be doing stuff like that where there's bonuses that apply to each empire during their holidays.
What I really like about this particular journey, and I'm going to be watching it unfold and with great interest over the next few months, is that in particular, the Empire holidays, from my understanding, the celebration of them largely came from players originally. Role players would come together and do Federation
Yes.
Day. And I remember it was at some point, it was a dev, it might have been you, it might have been somebody else that actually came to me to get more information about Federation Day. And of course, at that point, I didn't have any idea. I was able to link him up with the people that did know. But like, it was one of those things that CCP recognized what players were already celebrating about the people that were into the empires and all that stuff, and took what was effectively an in-game RP event and promoted it to the point where now, you know, it became kind of like this a subtle like weekend event, a lesser event compared to these bigger. There's these 2-week events where there's sites and there's tracks and there's rewards, and then there's these weekend events that are basically login events related to the empire. Maybe a skin is for sale, but it was like it was just it was CCP reflecting more about the different empires, and if you wanted to be cynical, filling up that time with they didn't have larger events. But this year, again, you're iterating on it again. Now you've established this rhythm of these different holidays. You're doubling down and saying these are real things that we should be looking forward
Yes, yeah, and that's something that I think you're absolutely right that these I think the original dates might have been set by CCP if I remember correctly, but just in a like as in world news articles that didn't have any in-game events associated with them, and then players built on them with in-game events. And so for a great example of that is Federation Day, which has a really long tradition of events in Luminaire, including of the Federation Grand Prix, which started as a player event, and then CCP built on it, and we stole the name and did cool stuff with it. And the I think it's always really good when we can take advantage of that player enthusiasm, and we can just kind of plus it, right? So once again this year, there's going to be player run events for Federation Day in Luminaire. Definitely worth for everyone to visit. We're going to do our best to highlight them and signal boost them, and then we'll also have other stuff going on in the time around that all throughout the Federation. So I'd say these events are still like in some ways they're smaller than an event like Capsulator Day or like the or Guardians Gala, but so are like we are always running different cadences of events, right? So there's some are really big, like Capsulator Day is always really big, like the Yule Festival, the Christmas time events are always really big. But events like the Grand Prix are a little bit more niche, sometimes a bit more experimental, and that could be really cool too. And this is another example with Stargate Trailblazer, one of those more niche, more experimental events, and us sort of building up different types of experiences for events. But in the future, we'll keep, I think, every year making these National Day holidays a bit bigger every time. So Federation Day this year is going to be significantly bigger than last year. Last year was obviously bigger than the year before. Next year, the plan will be to bring the Grand Prix back to its traditional date at Federation Day, add that to what we did this year, and make something even bigger than what we've had before.
Well, I don't know if you've paid attention, but your leadership has said that Eve is going to last forever. So I would figure out what your growth chart is when it comes to these kinds of things, because, you know, in 3075, it might just unbelievable in Lumina. No. So
I can't promise it'll be, yeah, I can't promise it'll be bigger than the year before every year,
yeah,
but it, yeah, we want to, as we're going to always want to be doing cool things with this to get players, give players something interesting to explore. One of the reasons that we're focusing on these Empire Days this year with the Foundation Quadrant is we realize this is a good opportunity to introduce players a bit to the lore. There's a group of players, obviously, and you're one of the most enthusiastic members of this community that really cares about the lore, that informs other people about the lore. But there's also a lot of people that play Eve for a long time that maybe only know little bits and pieces. And so we wanted to make this a good opportunity for just slightly lore curious folks to learn more about each empire.
yeah, the lore in Eve is, I often say it's very environmental. So,
Mhm.
you know, there's a lot of things that you're like maybe taught if you watch like the Eve Origins trailer or read like a couple of things where you'll get some very high level feelings about things. And it isn't until you start to dig in deeper that you realize the true nature of a lot of these organizations and like where the like plots really start to get interesting. So it's not like something that you normally can just grasp from a surface level understanding. But part of that has to do with the fact that like these empires and NPCs and lore and all that stuff has always been kind of secondary. And the player base has always kind of reinforced that in the fact that Eve is about player stories, not about NPC stories, blah, blah, blah. There have been times in which the NPC stories have taken off, in particular, you know, Templar 1, Empyrean Age, great books. There's Chronicles and all the sorts of stuff. But I've been a critic of this for quite some time. One of the things that has stopped people in the past from hooking into the lore is an absence of someone to connect to or relate with the empires. Now, you know, pirates have their NPC leaders. Sancha is a very iconic leader, but we never like hear very much from the leaders. And when it comes to the empires, the leaders are either not understood or are sometimes even background characters. For a long time, you couldn't even see Rodin in game, even though he was the president of the Federation. Today, the Federations has all four of the leaders, at least I presume all four of the leaders. We'll go with 3 asterisk leaders of the 4 empires on it. Should this reflect that there's going to be, and you also mentioned that there's going to be 4 videos for this quadrant. Is this actually a concerted effort to like go back through and shore up and like build out the empires and the various entities and give them a face and give them something that we can connect to and work with?
Yes, that is absolutely a part of what we're trying to do here, and that ties into that goal of giving an opportunity for people that have played E for a while, that are interested in it, but haven't learned a ton about the lore, to give them a path in and a path to learn about these leaders and put a face to the empires and learn a bit about the personalities of them. That's a big part of what we're hoping to do with the Foundation Quadrant.
And Walking Dude
That's
coming
part
in
of why you're seeing.
with a tier 1 sub.
But
I'm sorry, man. Walking Dude, thank you so much for that. Let's celebrate by showing us your clades. Awesome. All right. So,
yeah, I was just gonna that's part of why you'll see things like us following through on the on Celestigard's campaign promises,
Right.
is a little bit about what you're seeing from the Federation in Stargate Trailblazers, and without giving too much away, some of the stuff you're going to see during Federation Day is distinct based on what her priorities are, and so you'll be able to like. Obviously, the people that have been reading the world news will know a lot of this, but for the people that haven't, they'll be able to learn a bit more about it through environmental storytelling, and that'll be just exposed more in the game.
Maria coming in with another sub. Thank you so much. Keep the clades coming. I'm gonna keep the shtick low so that way when YouTubers watch it, they don't like look at their watch and skip away. But I really really appreciate it. So, all right. So the foundations, you're digging more into the various different empires. The events are going to be part of this.
You're and like I said, you're absolutely right about trying to make sure that players can see these characters and have some personal like connections with these characters, that especially the ones that haven't been as exposed before, and that partially applies to characters that have been in the game before and are going to be highlighted more. So without going into giving away exactly what's going to happen, there's, for instance, part of what we're prepping for the Liberation Day event, the Liberation Games, is there's some special, there's some work we had to do that involved going back through and updating the character model of Karen Midgelar.
All right. That's a good one. Okay, I do also want to interrupt real quick. There was a question, somebody was talking about being able to opt out of events and hide them. And so I just want to show, because some people may not know this.
Yeah.
So in the top left-hand corner where you have all of your information, there's also all of these charms right above it. And if you click on the charm, you can make them hide and appear. So if I click on this, then you'll be able to see it. If I click on it again, it makes it completely disappear. And this part's the clever one. You can also reorder it by dragging them left and right. So I can put the events at the top of my list if I wanted to, just so that way, like, it was there or whatever. So not only do you have minimization and the ability to open up like menus if there is one on these, but you can also just hide them completely and reorder them via the charms. That is, so going back to the Celis Agard thing, I do want to say, and I don't know if I should have put in a bug report about this, but it was pointed out last night that in the Galente President Corporation, she is listed as the CEO, but in the text description of the presidency, it says that the president is Jacobs Rodin.
Yeah, and that's just something that got missed on our end.
Yep.
For that kind of thing, when you see them, a bug report is honestly worth doing.
Okay.
That helps bring it to people's attention. But I mean, I think that's obviously a good candidate for us to be fixing up before Federation Day, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. It's a good time to go back and double check, because there's a lot of strings in the game, and so it's easy to...
There it is, indeed.
My favorite is when you guys just updated the shuttles, and so then you updated the descriptions of the shuttles. All of the shuttles with the word shuttle in it got updated, and the Leopard didn't yet. Whoopsie. Anyway.
Yep.
So bug reports all around. That's how we make this game better. So, all right. With Invasions, though, like, a lot of people really loved Invasions, but Edencom is pissed. And a big reason why is because they feel that there is no follow-up. There is no plan for support for them. And this isn't... I mean, like, Invasions was a pretty incredible thing because it was a full arc story that took place over 2 years. And part of me feels like this actually, like, rearranged our perception of things. And, like, now players today don't really know what it was like in the before time, and realize that, like, now is more normal than then was. But that being said, this idea of, like, in an agile development studio, you get your thing done and then you move on to the next thing. That leads itself to this risk of a lack of cohesive follow through, or like making sure that one thing, you know, completion and moves on to the next thing. With these Stargate events, you know, trying to make everything feel like there's proper follow up. Like, you know, if when this is over, it would be nice to have Celis Agard like respond to the people who did it well, since she asked us to do that. And I'll be frank, if that doesn't happen, I will also feel at least mildly cheated. Probably not like burn down CCP, but like I feel like these are the little bits that are the difference between it being really good and it just not quite working. And is CCP learning from that? Do you guys have, is this a challenge that you guys are working on, or how do you guys feel about this?
I think it's a good question. It's hard. I can't really speak for CCP as a whole on this. To be perfectly honest, CCP is a big organization, and I can really speak to the individual work that I'm getting to work on. But it's hard to really say to make statements for the company as a whole.
Sure.
Um, I agree. It's always better to be able to do follow up. I'm really happy when we're able to, and that part of I'm really happy with what we've been able to do with this team, with specifically the events we're working on, because our team has been around. Sometimes teams like get reshuffled. Our team has been around for more than a year, which is pretty good so far, and we've been able to do things like build on our features, and I'm really happy about that. But it's not always a guarantee. Like if the company decided there was a different priority that they needed me to work on, then I might have gotten moved off of this team onto something else, and in that case, we might not have been able to do as much follow up, or if other people from the team had been moved off. And it's just you work with the resources that you got. It's always a challenge,
And that
but we're
actually,
always trying to do our best with it.
that actually literally happened to you, if I remember correctly. In fact, the last time we were
It's happened a
talking,
bunch of times, and it
well,
does at any studio, right?
that's
Yeah.
true. But I mean, like in a very public way. You and I, we chat pretty regularly at this point. I feel like my check-ins with you is a pretty regular
Mhm.
check-in with CCP as a whole. And last time we were talking, it was about because the shield slaves. You
Mhm.
go on saying it's coming out in a week, and then immediately get reassigned. And so like there is a chunk of that to it. But um, I guess like, do you feel that there is a lesson learned from the Edencom thing? Because, if we're going to be embracing the lore more and asking our players to invest in it and whatnot, that that has to be rewarding. There is a follow through. Like there's almost like a promise there. And this is one of those situations, especially with like Elizabeth, who comes from way, 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 way back in the day. In her perspective, this is almost like burned me twice because of things like Empyrean Age and Templar One and all that stuff with the early role playing community. So like, is this something that
Yep.
that you guys are prepared to deal with?
What I can say is, uh, I know like individuals who have definitely learned, who are definitely like try to build on what we've seen from that, and try to make different decisions and better, like just keep improving. Um, but when it comes to like to making a statement for the company as a whole, like I said earlier on, I kind of pride myself on trying not to make statements that I can't follow through on. So
Absolutely.
uh, that's something that I can't say for sure. I would hope so. Like I think as an organization, every organization's always trying to improve and trying to learn and trying to do like build on what you've done really well. And I think CCV does try to do that. As for exactly whether this is going to be an improvement made in this area, uh, we'll see. Hopefully.
Awesome. I appreciate it. And thank you for going down there. We'll lighten the mood up a little bit again. Because yeah, it's a serious thing. And one of the reasons why I like talking to you is because you will, dig into those things, and where to draw the line about what you feel comfortable with talking about. And that, as an interviewer, makes me feel really good, because then I don't need to necessarily pull my punches too badly. And sometimes you surprise me
Yeah.
with what you're willing to share with me. Uh, but okay, so as far as like events altogether, you see that the earliest days of the events were just like sites with combat. There's loot at the end. It went through many different iterations. In the modern day, we've seen this pattern of like combat, and usually like a secondary, probably hacking site has now emerged, where you run up the track, you get a skin, you get the skins and all that sort of stuff. Um, is this really like landing into a routine? Is this a stopgap? What is where are you happy with what events have become? or are you still working towards something else that this is not quite it yet?
I mean, both. I'm very happy with what events have become. I think the events that we've been putting out over the last year and a bit have been really solid, and we've been constantly improving them, which leads to that, like, everything's always a evolutionary state, right? Just intermediate. When it comes to things like uh, adding in the hacking sites, this is something that we started doing for the Yule Festival for Winter Nexus last year, and it worked out well. So we tried it out, see, hey, is this going to be something that gets the same kind of activity, or that manages to get people excited to play, where we were not sure whether it's going to cannibalize the activity of the combat sites. Is it just going to be the same pool of players that play and they'll just shift around, or is it going to expand it to new people that weren't interested in that content before but are interested in the new variety of content? And so you try it out, you learn from it, and in that case it was a smash and success, and so that's why we've been bringing it back pretty regularly. You see that with things like the Proving Grounds, right? Try it out, see how it goes, tweak it, keep improving it. You see it with things like this, like Stargate Trailblazer. Our goal with this is to create something that is not just a one-off event, because we generally want to avoid doing just one-off things. That's suboptimal use of resources. Something that we can build on, something that we can tie into other events. So the plan after this one is to bring Stargate Trailblazer back for each of the Empire days, but it'll only be in that Empire during those. And then in the future, we want to do things like just have like a mining weekend where there's Stargate Trailblazer events or Resource Wars sites all over maybe Empire space, and we do like a mining booster giveaway over the weekend, stuff like that, and just have that be like tightly themed for, hey, if that's what you're excited about, there's an event for you going on right now. Feel free to come and try it out. And yeah, we're always trying to improve things, and I think you're going to see the next big twist on what we've been doing with these core events in the Minmatar Liberation games. So the Liberation Day event is the one that we're putting most of our work into right now. We know that we've got, as for the for Federation Day, we know that we've got the Grand Prix, which we are really happy with how it went, and we also have a list of things we want to improve on it for next year. Earlier on this year, we're going to move it back to Federation Day, and then the Liberation games are our big focus for this year for the summer, the Foundation Quadrant. And there's going to be some cool twists on the established pattern that you've seen so far, with these points with a reward track with a variety of different events or a variety of different sites available. We're going to also be trying to build on this choosing a group to align yourself with element, and see if we can do it in some cool, exciting ways, focused on notoriety, on affecting the lore, not on choosing where you build a Stargate. So we want to set expectations well, but it's in a really cool way. You're going to be able to make a choice that does matter for stuff that's going to be visible in the game forever.
Right. I think you may have hinted, or somebody has said something about it, where the fact that each faction has subcomponents, right? There's the heirs.
Yes.
There's the mega corporations, whatever. In the Minmatar in particular, there are the tribes. They are a tribal group, and so each tribe, they work together as a people, but the tribes definitely are not necessarily friends with each other or anything along those lines. And so the idea of like tribal competition is a big thing of there, and this is going to allow us to champion for our tribes, or for become a champion for a tribe. In a little way, it's almost like the Amar Championship allowed individual players to become the champion for a specific heir. This allows anyone to help champion their tribe. Is that actually a good example of something where you're like, oh my gosh, these guys, we need to make sure that they're competing over things, because they like to do stuff, but they like to compete over it. Is that a big piece of this?
I think giving people ways to customize their experience, to make a choice of, hey, so these tribes are obviously, they're all part of the same state, the same republic, but they all have their own history, they all have their own priorities. I want to choose which one I want to align with more than the others for the duration of this event. That's something we think is exciting in general, and we're really happy to be able to bring that into this event. We've obviously dipped our toes in it for obviously like the invasion's an extreme example of that. This is going to be a short-term event, so it's not going to be the same scale as the invasion. But things like with the Crimson Harvest last year, where we gave people sites from two different sides, if you could go and shoot up, we want to be providing more of those opportunities for players to make a cool choice.
Right. And so, and again, like the idea of competition,
And it doesn't.
go.
I'll say it doesn't necessarily need to be competition. Doesn't necessarily need to be cutthroat. It doesn't need to be you want to like destroy the other side. And this is a good opportunity with the tribes to explore competition that is maybe more like a sports competition where they want to win, but they don't have to hate each other, right?
I'm gonna leverage that to ask one of my questions that I'm almost certain that you're going to dodge, which is that you, speaking of competition, you have long been one of the biggest people who made the Alliance tournament happen.
One of many people, but yeah,
but I mean, you were one of the yes, one of many people for sure. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, you've been deeply involved, and it could very well be argued that the AT came on your back again, among others. But you put in. My point is that you put in labor of love. You put in the work and the time and effort to make that stuff happen. Obviously, we haven't had the AT for some time. You like to be coy and say hope springs eternal. The AT monument came up. CCP Aurora and other people that are involved in like competitions as players have been hired by CCP. Without like, is the AT coming back? How do you feel about the CCP as a company and its support of the competitive scene now compared to in the past? Do you feel like that's something you guys are taking seriously?
It's obviously massively improved compared to say last year, right? I'm really glad that it's so heavily improved compared to last year. I would like to see it improve even more. I would, and again, it's no surprise that like my answer to the to questions about the AT is going to be that I don't like. At the end of the day, it's not my call, and I'm not sure what'll happen. But that I do love competitive PvP in games like Eve. The Alliance tournament is something that's immensely close to my heart. I think I've told the story several times before, but the second Alliance tournament, so the first one that was broadcasted, the first one that was called something other than the Caldari Championship. That one, way back in 2006, is honestly probably the reason that I kept playing Eve Online. I started playing Eve in 2006. I hit like the couple of months, like I'm sort of like I've tried some things out, but it's maybe getting a bit samey. And watching that stream, seeing that element where all of these people in the single shard shared universe are watching this same competition that is not just a PvP team, but it's a team representing alliances that have their own interests as well, and that are a much larger group than just the team that's involved and actually playing on the field. That was something that caught my attention in a huge way. And that honestly, I probably like. There's a decent chance I wouldn't have kept playing Eve if it hadn't been for stuff like that really drew me to it. Yeah, so I absolutely love the AT. I love the work that's being done to support player competitions right now. I'm really glad that we've been improving it, and I hope we keep improving it. And I think we probably will keep improving it. Yeah.
And this is going to be one of the yeah. So either way, would you feel that? Would you argue in favor of bringing back the AT literally like as a statement, like try to bring back the AT as close to as it is as an institution and just make the next AT with AT ships and all that stuff? Or would would you argue in favor of uh, introducing more competitive tournament style gameplay support, regardless of whether or not it comes as like the literal format of the AT? Because those are two different
I mean,
things, like dojos
yeah,
versus
they
AT.
can be two different things for sure. Yeah, I think they both have a lot of value. As for which one I prioritize, there's a lot of business decisions that go into stuff like that.
That's fair.
I've been involved obviously with the AT, but I've also been involved with prototypes around player like in-game systems for player competition, and then obviously I've been involved with the proving grounds, which are a very different thing than the AT, but have some shared elements.
Yes.
Um, there, I mean, we had prototypes like the dojos that were tried out years ago, that CCP Veritas worked on, and I was excited about at the time, and what contributed to some of the design of those prototypes. Yeah, I think those all have value for sure. As for like weighing them against each other, that's a tougher question that I'm not sure I can answer.
I'm really glad that you brought up the abyssal proving conduit again. So the abyssal proving conduit used to be. It's always been kind of an experiment. It was a at the end of the abyss, you'd have to go in there, and that had its pros and cons. I mean, like it existed, but it was niche and it had its own challenges. Since then, you changed over the abyssal proving conduits to be uh, activate filament, go on in, but they are basically weekend events for the most part. They have varying different restrictions and what and such. When they first came out, I know that there was a lot of challenges. There's been still accusations of win trading, etc. It looks like you guys have iterated pretty aggressively to look at how to disrupt all of that or how to still make good and interesting challenges. Why don't you talk for a minute about how the abyssal proving conduit has been going?
Yeah, I'm really happy with that, how that feature has been going. It provides us an opportunity to give a very different type of PvP experience than what you would get normally in the game. So it definitely generates that variety. And like I said at the beginning of the show, giving people a lot of variety is a big part of what this particular team exists for, Team Raw, the one that I'm working on. And being able to have an event that runs for a short time, which helps condense the population enough to get good critical mass, so you have people to queue up against more reliably, and giving a varied set of formats allows for people to do new stuff that maybe they haven't done before, and use some of the skills they've used for years in different contexts in a new context that's exciting. And that's something that I think works out really well. It's obviously we were happy with the existence of the old proving conduit. It was a nice feature that had gotten added to the abyss. But we realized, and especially after talking to the community of people that were involved with the abyss and what these folks were looking for, this was something that was going to attract more people if we made it something that you go directly into it, and if we set it up as an event. And that was absolutely the correct case, that there's far more people engaging with it now than ever before. And yeah, I think like I'm really excited to keep experimenting. We've been doing things like running the 18 cruiser free for all that we ran for the 18th Capsuleer Day. Things like the one that's coming up, not this weekend, but next weekend. We're going to try for the first time a 1 day proving ground.
Mm.
So on June 5th, there is going to be a single day 24-hour 1v1 battleship proving ground, running from downtime on June 5th to downtime on June 6th. And this is something that maybe it'll work out really well, maybe it won't. We're going to experiment. We're going to see how it goes, but it's either way, it's really exciting.
Right. So, okay. One of the criticisms though that comes out, or one of the things I've heard, is that like there's um that abyssal proving ground video that was put into the game talking about the top winners, and Cable,
Yeah.
won by a pretty significant margin. And, it's not a big secret that he did so by gaming the mechanics, however you want to call it. He ensured that he got more wins than you would if you were just doing it the
Yeah,
quote unquote normal
primarily by
way.
avoiding queuing up against other people that
Right.
were kind of top competitors, right? They would just make sure not to queue up at the same time.
So, but a lot of people kind of look at that video and grumble about this because they see it as like this is invalid, or like in almost like it leaves a sour taste in their mouth or something like that. But at the same time, like the rules are the rules, and he played by the same
Yeah,
rules as
he didn't
everybody
break any
else, and
rules.
he got the most wins based on the rules
Yeah.
at the time. So what is CCP's feeling about it? You guys obviously made the video, gave him his prize. You didn't try to get him on a technicality. What do you guys feel about Cable?
It's a great achievement. It's a great achievement, and it's something that like obviously he's using, like he's avoiding other top players by just like talking to them. But you don't get that high without being really, really good at the game. And we are trying to make a system that is going to provide a lot of fun for a lot of people, and so that means we do tweak things to make some of the tactics. Like for instance, he took advantage with a lot of other players of being able to fly really expensive ships. So we changed the rules later to make a cap on how expensive your ship can be going in to make it more fun for a wider number of people. But a sandbox game, although it doesn't mean that there is no rules, it means that there's a wide variety of different experiences and different rules you can engage with. And so, yeah, I think it's perfectly appropriate for some things like the Alliance Tournament. Like the Alliance Tournament, in recent years, like the recent decade, has rules that don't allow you to collude, to coordinate with another team, and those were put in place for specific reasons to avoid specific unhelpful gameplay. But
So that's
not
a
every system
player.
in our game needs to have that. So the proving grounds are not the same thing as the Alliance Tournament, which is not the same thing as the Stargate Trailblazer, which is not the same thing as trading in JITA. There's the amount of interaction and kind of coordination that is acceptable. It's at the end of the day, we'll set rules that we're trying to create interesting experiences for. We don't want people to have to limit themselves more than that, right?
Yeah. And the AT is also ran by humans and therefore, managed by
Mhm.
humans and allows for a lot more nuance in moderation. Whereas something
Yes.
like an
Yeah,
AT,
building a
like,
specific system, right,
like,
is going to be it's going to be much harder to get subtly about that, right? And like,
yeah,
I mean, obviously the classic example of that is comparing like a video game to a tabletop role-playing game.
right. Yeah.
The type of rules you can have in a video game are very different than in a TTRPG because you have human moderated interactions in a TTRPG, while in a digital RPG, it's an unfeeling computer that has to enforce the rules.
Right.
And those, one of them isn't necessarily better than the other. They are just very different, and you have to play to the strengths of the format.
And the honest truth is that Cable is also a player. And so
Yeah.
in the same way that somebody who tried a different strategy to win and lost to him, if you were to have disqualified him after the fact because you didn't like his method, then that would have been he put in his own effort for that. So it's easier to say, well, we've all learned from this. Congratulations, you get your name on the board. And from, we do things like 18-man free for all gnosis in order to make sure that nobody does such things in the future. But that's the thing. Like, by
Well,
changing up
the
the event rules, you make it so that different things take different priorities at different times. So you may get away with it this
yes.
time, but next time it ain't gonna happen.
And it's not always a linear thing too, right? It's not always, hey, we need to block this out forever. Like I think it'd be very possible for us to do a proving ground that allows more blingy ships in the future, but that'll be one that then allows more blingy ships, and people can approach those rules differently.
Right.
It doesn't have to the same way as like a 1v1 format. Like, so the event coming up next weekend is 1v1. That is a format that is very heavily skill based and fitting based. There isn't really an opportunity for politics to apply within the arena itself. However, with the 16-person free for all, that's like half of the game is politics. So like deciding who to prioritize shooting at and like getting these signals from people. Because 18 people, there's going to be a lot of chaos, right? And each one of them is fun in a different way. There isn't one that's necessarily better than the others. Definitely, some players will prefer one or the other. The format that comes after the Battleship one is going to be the Federation Day specific format, and that one is going to go back to being a little bit more in arena politics space, where there's opportunities for a lot of like interesting choices of who you decide to shoot at any given moment. And then we'll go after the one after that. We'll be back to one where there isn't really that, and where it's just kind of based on overcoming your opponent with direct PvP skill. And so, yeah, I think having that variety is really valuable.
So, but given that, and I agree, and also given several other things, the effect of these individual tournaments on the market on any given weekend, as people
Yeah.
prepare for them and as people run them, and as people that wish to engage with them, it feels like it would be incredibly important to communicate this stuff clearly so that way people know what's happening. Like I've even read the rules because I read the tea leaves on Hobo Leaks about the stuff, and it hadn't occurred to me that it was one-day event in battleships. And so and this is true about Resource Wars and the Gold Rocks and all that stuff too, is that I sometimes feel like CCP get these clever ideas in their head and they put the clever design into the game, but if it doesn't get communicated, players don't see the tapestry. And it's great for somebody like me who's like, my job is to put Eve into context for my fellow Empyreans, but like, I actually like, I'm concerned about my personal responsibility that like, if I don't talk about what Proving Conduit is coming next weekend, do people know? And like, you have to know in order to do it.
I think it's a very good point. Obviously, we have some tools for finding it, like including in game. Like right now, you can look on the market or look at the objects that you get from the Running in the Abyss. You'll see the 1v1 Battleship filament that has these core rules on it. But yeah, that when it comes to showing things like the in-game news window that pops up, that only happens on the day.
Right.
So for a lot of people, they're not necessarily realizing this ahead of time. And I think we could definitely do better on that. Of what I would really love to see, and this is I'm going to disclaimer what I'm about to say with I cannot promise this, but this is my dream for the work that I'm doing right now with events. What I'd really like to see us have is a section of the agency that covers events in general, that's always there, that has listings of the events that are going on at the moment, that have that's an issue, that have
I wasn't even trying to show an issue. I was just trying to say like, no, I haven't done that much of these events myself, I must confess, but but there is this UI.
Yeah, and I'd like to have a section of the agency that's dedicated to events that has like a calendar built in that lets you know, hey, there's going to be this coming up, and then there's this coming up, and then obviously that'll only give us a few weeks ahead of time, or some things more than a few weeks ahead of time might be a bit more general and non-specific yet. But there is, I think, a lot of value in providing people with a one-stop place to be able to see what's coming up. And at the moment, we're doing a really good job of letting people know about what's going on when it starts, but we're not doing as good of a job of letting people know ahead of time so they can prep for it, which is a part of the kind of decisions you make in an MMO, right?
CCP Aurora kind of just threw you under the bus, and she's like, "Oh, there's an in-game calendar."
There is an in-game calendar. I would like to build that into the agency as well. Yeah,
that'd be really cool. Yeah,
there's a lot that can be done to improve that stuff.
Shoot, I had a different point that I wanted to make, but I think I just lost it.
Yeah. CCP Signal talking in chat there. Yeah, there's no date in that window, that UI that you had opened there for the Proving Grounds, because we haven't actually submitted the data for that event's date into the game yet. And the reason for that is because we were actually waiting for some code to get tested that needed to go in first. And it's like, this is stuff that we definitely have a lot of room to improve on. I'm really happy with the work that we've done. One of the great things about working in a game like Eve, gigantic game with so many features, you're never going to run out of things to improve. You've got great job security.
And that's another piece that I think that players need to appreciate, which is that, like, on the one hand, you guys are experimenting with new design with the tools that you have, but on the other hand, there's also just the tools development itself. Like, these events have not been progressing over time slowly because you guys are being super cautious. It's that software development takes a while, guys, and they're like, you guys basically started with half a UI and like working with what you got, and you just keep on going until, like, okay, now we can do data sites. What does that allow us to do? And, now we can do these things. And what does that allow us to do? To that end, how big of a priority is it? I'm now going to make my, and you probably will see this coming, but like, my biggest thing is I have ADHD, man. Like, the fact that I can't, like, I am not making progress if I have already completed a task. Like, future progress is not included. It is an incredibly negative experience to me. And so staying on that is a big deal for me. And every time I fail to, it feels bad, man. And so, like, I would love it if it just kept tracking my time, so that way I could just tick through them all at once and be like, just grind for an hour. Because I want to be able to go into the zone, right? Especially with these event sites, I want to be able to just go, and then at the end of an hour, click through and see how many I've done. But I can't do that. How big of a priority is it to fix that?
For clarity for people, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So you're talking about the challenges in the agency. So the challenges that have point rewards. You have to click the button to then have it, especially the
Right.
ones that are chained together, right?
So I'm showing this one right here. Right now, like I've partially completed. Don't kick that, please.
Yeah.
I've partially completed the ore deposited challenge, right? So if I'm in the middle of a site and I deposit something like 6,000 ore, this will be finished. All of the ore I deposit after that will mean nothing until I realize that I need to click the button
So
in
you
order
click
to
it. Yeah.
finish it, and
Yep.
then I can start making progress again.
So I completely agree. This is actually a bug. So we have in our authoring tools for these things a checkbox for whether it requires you to press the button to continue or whether it just auto completes and then moves on. The autocomplete checkbox doesn't work at the moment if the challenge has a reward in points.
Well,
And that's a bug. So we actually have a UI in our internal tools that's supposed to make that work, but it doesn't right now. And we would like to get to that and get that fixed. It's come up a few times. For instance, in the Capsuleer Day Proving Ground, we ran a challenge that gave you some money for killing
yeah.
or doing damage to other players in the Proving Ground. And I actually found it really frustrating myself. Like you have to like be clicking on that, clicking on the enter the Proving Grounds challenge and remember to do that when you're like about to enter a stressful PvP situation, or else it won't start counting your damage done. Yeah, that's absolutely something that we want to improve.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your answer. It definitely encourages me to know that we're on the same page on that one, and hope to see it fixed soon. Because it's okay for now, but like especially so with this event in particular, I thought that the original track that we were going to be measured by was the points in that we earned, and therefore
Yeah.
I thought that we were actually like getting in the way of our progress by doing that. So that was super stressing me out. But this is fine, and I do. It would be awesome to be able to like build it up and just be able to see like because being able to click through them all at once would feel really good in contrast.
Yeah.
Um,
And like on the another bit of that system that kind of works the same way but does actually work properly is collecting the rewards in the reward track. So like you get your points in the reward track and there's the rewards at different stages, and that works the way we would want this to work, where you can get yourself all the way to the end and then just click 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 click, click to accept. There you go. So like you haven't accepted those yet, and that's great. When you click that, it'll go into your redeeming queue, and that is the way that we would want this to work as well. Yeah.
yep,
Or potentially, depending on implementation, it might just give you the points and not require the click in that case.
that's fair. I mean, I still would love this to just be a giant scrolling list of all of the different things that I can complete at the end of the day. There could be a button that lets me complete them all if somebody wants me to, but like seriously, being able to see after the fact how many I've done is useful in its own right. And on the subject of after the fact, what about like the ability to see a record of these things? There's a lot of people that they get their points and then they keep doing the event after the fact. They get these massive point rewards and then it just goes away and they feel like, feels bad. Is there any ability to move this into like the activity tracker or preserve these numbers?
Yeah, I
Are
would
they
like to
being
see
preserved?
that. Yes, actually, it is in
So,
the DB. I mean, I can't guarantee all of it will always be easily accessible, but yeah, it is in the DB. And yeah, I think getting more of this in activity tracker would be good. As well, this is the kind of thing that I would also like to see in this hypothetical future events section of the agency, is it could show you some of the previous events, and you could look at some of these pages for previous events as well.
I think that would be really cool, especially given like in a leader where I might want to give a reward for the person that gets the most points
Yep.
during a time or something along those lines, especially with this particular event.
Mhm.
Although, thankfully, you've made it easy for me to find my top contributors. Actually, that does remind me, circling back on the Resource Wars sites themselves, one of the things I did hear about the way that we're tracking these is that you're giving top individual and top corporations, but not all
Yes.
alliances are created equal. My alliance, almost all of my guys are in one corporation, and so when my alliance does something, you see they get their name way up there. Dr. Spod's organization is much more distributed, and so while they have like 3 or 4 corporations on the list, they're definitely not going to be as high, or might even get knocked off. So, is there a consideration towards alliance level recording of these kinds of things?
It's a good point. We could hypothetically do it as an alliance or corp. We were a bit concerned that an alliance version of that would just kind of stomp on corps that aren't in alliances and maybe don't have as big of a group. But obviously, you could just stuff everyone into one corp as well too. We just needed to kind of pick a scope to end it on, and that's the one we went with for this event. But that is a good bit of feedback, I think. That is would be potentially doable for future similar events. It would be to have a top 5 alliances and or corps that aren't in alliances.
And it is
Yeah, that would be.
true. It is true that you did say that if somebody like has an alt and they don't want their alt to be recognized or whatever, they just want it to be in their
Yeah,
main. You won't combine their points or anything like that to let somebody like get extra high, but
no,
like
and that's again the kind of thing that we could maybe do in the future for future events, but not for this event
right.
when we've already got it started. But yeah, we there was somebody that asked about it, and so I said yeah, we'd be happy to if you want to if you have multiple characters on there and you want to take some of them off, we can just count them, like shift everybody else up.
So do you feel that this kind of reward, the like a name on an event on a monument, is that proving to be a useful way of doing things? Do you like how it goes? This is obviously, as you said, not the first time. They go back way.
Mhm.
One of the most famous, I believe, that you were involved with was the T3 Cruiser, or sorry, T3 Destroyer release event.
Yep,
Um,
where we have the names on the BPOs or BPCs because you don't have BPOs, but the blueprints.
we
Yep.
and then for Federation, sorry, the Grand Prix, you did it. For this, you did it, which is kind of showing that it's becoming more common. So two sides to
Yeah,
this. One, is it proving out to be a successful way to motivate players? And two, are you concerned that if you do it too much, it will begin to diminish its value?
I'd say for the first one, it definitely is motivating some players. How it compares to, at the end of the day, we're always going to motivate more people by just like giving them misc. But it definitely is motivating some players, and we saw it work really well for optional things. I don't think we would ever have it be like the sole reward for an event. But what we saw for the Grand Prix that we were really happy with was that the majority of players just run through the track. They go do the sightseeing. There's no time limits on it, and they get all the rewards, the in-game rewards that have some like mechanical value. And then there was this smaller subset of players that got into the racing, and for them they got this name on the monument.
Right.
And so I think that pattern where there's some rewards that are the more generic ISK and loyalty points that you can use to buy skins and whatever other stuff, and like boosters and all of these mechanical rewards are the bread and butter, and then we can use leaving your name somewhere in the universe as a extra reward for people that are into it, and you can just choose whether you're into it or not. As for whether we feel it's going to reduce the value of it, I mean, obviously, I think you could say it could, but I still think there's a lot of it's better for us to do it more and give more cool opportunities as long as they're not the same, right? We don't want it to be to all feel identical as much as possible. These should be the place where you're seeing this should be unique. I don't think the fact that we have the names and the blueprints for the Tech 3 destroyers and the fact that there's like the names of all the Titan pilots that died in BTAC-R on the BTAC-R monument, those don't really compete with each other. They're the same thing at the end of the day, but they're in such different contexts that I think they both exist in a really separate uh, in part of people's imaginations.
I really agree. And I do believe that like I like the fact again that we leave our mark on the universe and sometimes big, sometimes small. But like all of these things allow these stories to be made, and new players come and they ask me the stories of these different places and these different locations and this different stuff. And you're right, one story doesn't diminish the other, and I think that all it does is make Eve cooler and cooler and cooler, that we have all these different kinds of, each one of us have put our brick, and some of our bricks have our name on it, and that I really enjoy. So I appreciate you
Yeah.
you doing that stuff.
And I think it's the type of reward that works better in Eve than in any other game, right? Like if the game had a bunch of shards, if the game was lasting only a few years, and then the second version with a new world was releasing, then this kind of thing would matter, but it wouldn't have nearly the same kind of impact that it does in Eve, where you can go and you can see the destroyed monument outside of G244 that was the monument to the winners of a riddle competition way back in the day. You can see the Alliance Tournament monument in Amamaki that pre-existed the one that we put in Sanctum recently. These have a ton of history behind them, and you can feel confident that there's going to be more history that comes out of the stuff that gets added to the game now.
So speaking of rewards, back to the resource wars thing. Like the resource wars themselves have, you know, we said before they've got the ISK and they've got the LP. The ISK, as we pointed out, is probably better than most people realize once you start thinking about it as far as like a team and at scale at the higher
Yes,
tier. In fact, I would argue that
it's
at our
it,
higher tier, we were making the same amount that you would with like high level mission running or even invasion, our invasion fleets. You know, making at least 1,000,000 ISK per minute to everybody in the fleet at criticals.
yeah, we tried to have the like top end gameplay feel in that same kind of zone as a experienced group running uh invasion sites or incursion sites or things like that. Yeah, and it's absolutely the case that this is the best ISK per M3 you can get in the game mining right now. Obviously, you're doing it in a limited set of ships, but and in some cases you might have competition for the sites. But yeah, it's good money. It's the kind of money that we can only actually kind of get away with doing because it's a temporary event that we'll be bringing back, but it's not like there all the time.
Well, that's
Like
true.
if this was in the game all the time, it would actually cause like economy problems.
Well, that's true, but actually, like this was also true about the old resource wars, right? Like that the resource wars did have some pretty decent ISK payout, but only if it got to scale and only if or like at the higher tiers and you
Yeah,
know whatnot. But because it was never took off, it never really got to that scale.
yeah.
The
This is a lot higher than that though. We
Oh, is
cranked
it?
it up quite a
Okay,
bit from the
okay.
old version.
Well,
Yeah.
that's fair. So,
Yeah,
but
this is like 6 or 7 times higher than that.
fair enough. But the thing that got the attention in the old resource wars, and I feel to a lesser extent is happening again, is the LP store. People are looking at the
Hmm.
LP store and they're not seeing faction modules and faction stuff. They're seeing just skins and cosmetics, and they're not seeing as valuable. Now, this, in my opinion, I, on Twitter, I remember I when this first started, I said to you, this sure is a lot of pomp and circumstances to just remove volatiles from the skins, right? Like, because for years I said that's literally all that Resource Wars needed. Like the sites themselves are well designed, they're fun, they're worth doing. It was just the fact that volatile skins required bind on pickup or were bind on pickup that ultimately made it so that you guys had to sell it with the ships, which made it so that you were selling them for more ISK than the ships were worth, which just kind of created this cascade of problems in the design that made it so that the LP store was literally a scam. In contrast,
Yes.
now the skins are just normal skins. They are
Yep.
sellable, they are tradable, they are the way that, in my opinion, they probably should have been in the first place.
Fun fact: the way they're in there right now is the way that they'd originally been intended to be in the original Resource Wars LP store until a bunch of complicated stuff that I can't really go into the details of happened, and CCP kind of tied its own shoelaces together and tripped over.
One day, one day I need somebody, I don't care if it's in like a bar or what, to explain to me what the hell happened to volatile skins. But
This is one of those stories that's like a tell it at GDC 20
yeah,
years later kind
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
story. Yeah.
totally, totally, totally. So,
Like,
okay,
yeah. Do a
moving
retrospective someday.
moving on though. So my point though is that these LP store rewards I think are actually better than people are giving credit for, but are in fact secondary rewards. And one of the things about LP stores that
Yeah.
I found very enlightening was from um, the Hilmar interview from like Eve at Home, I think it was during the Invasion tour. It was the first time I've ever heard CCP talk about LP stores, and because we think of it as a secondary currency, and that's why players say like I should be able to trade LP and stuff like that. That just comes from the idea of LP as a currency, but he framed it as frequent flyer miles. The loyalty, they aren't. It isn't like they're rewarding our loyalty in the same in the way of like here's your secondary bonus. It's to convince you to keep accumulating points so you can get to the next prize. So that way you keep working for their company instead of a different company beyond just them paying you more money, right? That's what it's all about. So the loyalty point store is always supposed to be, this secondary reward that's designed to reward loyalty more than be the reason why people go and do it. That said, do you regret any not putting something tangible or seen as valuable? Like DEDLP store has agency drugs. So it doesn't matter if you don't don't like anything else. You can always buy the agency drug. Do you regret not putting something like that in the resource wars, or do you plan on iterating on the LP stores?
More will always be better. Like I would never say if somebody at CCP was like, "Hey, I've got this great reward that we've developed, but we don't know where to put it. Do you want to put it in that LP store?" I'd be like, "Yeah, definitely." But I'm happy with what we've done with the store, especially given the context of these being a recurring event rather than a evergreen thing in the game. That being said, we are planning to add more stuff to it, but I can't promise. Like we've talked about adding like BPCs for boosters into it, maybe someday. That's the kind of thing that starts to get into like we need to do a lot of econ analysis for when we. So I can't promise anything there. But at least adding more skins over time. That's definitely something we're going to be doing. And the as yeah, like you said, a secondary reward for something that is going to be a recurring event, but an event rather than we don't expect these sites to be the thing that you do in the game. Like this is not going to be somebody's like main thing they do in the game because it's only going to be available once in a while. And we don't expect that the store is going to get to like that it's going to run out of value. There should be enough demand ideally for the skins especially, but also the clothing items from new players that want them, that you'll be able to sell those and get some money for your LP even if you've already got all the skins and clothes yourself.
So Doc 10,011 pointed out something that I've actually heard a couple times. These new drugs that were introduced as part of this event have been really popular, and I think that would be a good thing and thematically related to be a place to put it, much like the agency drugs are in the DEDLP store.
Yep. I'll say we were able to make these drugs a bit more powerful and a bit more prevalent because of the fact that they're limited time. You can't just like get 10,000 of them and build up a giant stockpile, right? The calculation becomes different balance wise when you can generate an arbitrarily large number of them.
But you can only generate the LP during these limited time events, though.
That's yeah. But potentially you could run a lot of the sites. So it obviously, yeah, they're like it's not actually arbitrarily large, but it's a much different type of constraint than finish the track, get the number for your character. That's a very nice tidy limit that makes it really easy for us to balance them.
Speaking of,
so it might be if we ever do something like that, it might just be different ones with different stats and different details.
Awesome. Speaking of rewards, events, and your history with pirate implants, one of the really awesome things about these events they've been a good opportunity for you to introduce those pirate implants that were tied to each of the pirate. It wasn't just shield slaves.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of them that you had laid out and kind of got thrown in the wayside. But slowly but surely, as each pirate faction gets their event, you tied into those implants into them. We didn't know for a long time. I remember even last year I asked you whether or not the Valamir implants were going to return with the Grissus event. You said you couldn't say and you didn't know. Seems like they will. This idea of
we brought them back twice now. So
right. So as I mentioned earlier, the calendar year is really starting to become structured. And the idea of it like returning is starting to become more confident. When it comes to the introduction of these implants, is this something that you are happy to continue to introduce new things each year into these things? Or is it like, this is just now the way that these implants are introduced and this is like now this is the event, and next year it'll be the same thing again.
So I don't think it'll ever be exactly the same thing again. We're always going to be tweaking it, but the pattern that you saw with, I think you'll have sometimes it'll be a completely new event, like the Capsulator Day one. Sometimes it'll be a tweaked version of the event, like we had with the hunt, for instance. That's a good example of one where the hunt was pretty similar from 2020 to 2021. There was changes. We didn't have the season track where you get the agency track where you get points and get rewards from that back in 2020. We didn't have the hacking sites in 2020. We added new stuff building on the old stuff. But a lot of it was brought back, the parts that we were happy with, that worked well, that we can build on. I think that's the pattern you should expect from events, is that we're going to take what we had last year and try to remix it, try to add some new stuff, and use the fact that, so like, because we had so much of the event done last year for the hunt and for the Guardians Gala and some of these other sites some of these other events that have come back, that's freed us up to do this higher density of events. So the reason that there's more events happening in 2021 than in 2020 is because we are building on taking advantage of the work we did last year to allow us to do more work this year with the same number of people.
All right, sorry about that. He's doing TikTok. So
no problem.
With these, so with these events now kind of becoming more stabilized, I guess. And again, like, all of these little nuances are, I think, important. And honestly, events have also kind of become the new place for high quality PvE, because the emerging conduits were really good for players, but ultimately fell to bots. And events mix things up just enough that a player can easily make the minor tweaks to about the same power level. You make your minor tweaks based on the nuances of it, and you can operate pretty good. But they're also gone fast enough for the bots to really optimize it and to roll out at scale. And I've always kind of seen that as being one of the reasons why you guys have leaned towards events since emerging conduits rise to popularity and then cause such big problems with botters. First of all, is that a fair assessment of the situation?
I wouldn't say that's like a main motivation, but it is definitely one of the advantages we get from events. Another issue with the emerging conduits that we get an improvement of with events is that with any permanent content or very long-term content, there's always going to have to be the chance that you might need to nerf the payouts. Like, people optimize better than you expected. There's always that thing that there's a decent chance something will have to get tweaked. With events, what we can do is we can release it for a couple of weeks. We can then spend the time in the off season learning, taking a look at the data, mulling it over, deciding what we need to tweak for the next year. And that allows us to be, in a lot of cases, more generous with these events. So there's a reason that these events tend to have really good payouts relative to a lot of other PvE activities, is that we don't need to worry as much about breaking the economy with something that is short term, and then that we can spend time looking back on and tweaking for the next year.
Right. So, and obviously when events come out now, there's that big splash that everybody sees, and it's in the launcher and all that kind of stuff. So people are aware when the events occur. CCP Convict giving a tier 1 sub to CCP Signal. I've said it earlier again. I'm not going to go the whole route, but man, what a legend. Thank you, CCP Convict. Congratulations, CCP Signal. Now you two can join in the celebration by showing me the clades. All right.
CCP Convict is such a nice man. I almost feel bad for calling him a large, steep-sided rock hill with a flat top.
It's funny because when the position that he eventually took was put out, I applied for it because sure, why not? And I got robo rejected. And I messaged several people at CCP. You might have even been one of them, where I was like, I'm going to pay very close attention to who you guys pick for this role, because if you guys hire some, outside of the community dude, like from like EA or something like that, no, then no. But as soon as I saw a CCP Convict, I messaged all of those same CCP people and I said, there's no one on this planet that would have been better to be chosen. Thank you so much for choosing him, and thanks for coming on board, CCP Convict. Anyway, back to you though, CCP Fozzie. And we are coming at 2 hours, so if you want to put a limit
We
at
want to
some
maybe
point,
go for another like 15 minutes or so, and before a little before midnight Iceland time.
sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, well then you're giving me the 10-minute warning this time, flipping the tables. But so knowing that though, like the thing that I keep running into is players don't know that the new AI is so much better than the previous AI. And while the events come and go, it feels like the public consciousness of the player base hasn't accepted events as a thing to do, right? Like I've been encouraging people to think of events as like it's an on and off. There's like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. You never know what it's going to be, but like you get ready for it, and then you engage with that thing, and then you have your downtime, and that as a way to live. But there's no Eve Academy page on people who pay attention to events and staying on top of the agency and stuff like that. There's mission runners have this continual line that draws them deeper and lets them understand that what they're doing now is part of a bigger thing. Just like with the context of understanding the rules of a proving conduit and why that makes that particular proving conduit special. Do you think that there's going to be any effort to make event running, engaging with these content, more in the public consciousness?
I would definitely like us to, and that's the kind of thing that, like, as I mentioned before, my dream of having this dedicated section of the agency with a wider explanation of what events are and what's coming up and maybe what's already happened. That would go a long way, I think, to that. We'd also always be interested in player suggestions for how best to communicate this kind of stuff. But yes, I think we can definitely do more to communicate to people. We've been really, honestly, really happy with the amount of people we've gotten into these events, especially the ones that you could call sort of the baseline events, the ones that follow the formula of there's a site that you can go shoot some NPCs in and get some rewards, like the gala, like the hunt, like Crimson Harvest, right? These ones, they are among the most heavily used activities in our entire game. Like when they release, they like are competitive with anom running and mission running as just like things that a large number of people do. So we're really happy with that. But obviously, that could go like there's people that are missing out on it that could get engaged with it. And I'd say though, so you mentioned kind of like event running as a thing, as something you could have as your career. Obviously something you could do, but I also would want I would love us to have enough variety in events that actually that might be the kind of thing where you don't find every single event every single week to be the one for you, where there's ones that have different stuff going on,
Yeah.
and so there's opportunities to try new things. So it's less of like the thing that you do as it is like you've got your path that you're on, and here's a bunch of little cool things to see on the side of the road, a bunch of off ramps onto a town that you can explore. There's new stuff to see that maybe is a little bit different than what you're used to, and that helps keep the trip fresh. And that's what I'd like to see events be most of all.
Awesome. So another one of those questions that may just be letting you shut it down and move on, but it was brought up in the chat. This isn't really your thing anymore, but it may be the reason why people know your name. There has been, there's a war going on, Fozzi-sov, as it were. I call it Intozasov or Aegis-sov, but is still like more or less the
Yep.
way of the game. Are you still involved in that at all? And do you have anything to say about that topic?
I'm not actively involved in it. Obviously, we're like working at the company still. I see stuff behind the scenes and I chat with the people that are involved with it. But no, that's not the area of the game that I'm currently working on.
Do you think that
So yeah,
overall you're happy with how it has worked out? Like, because you designed that and you put it out, and like, or not you. First of all, it wasn't just you. You just happened to be
I was one of the designers that had it that
right.
was involved that had a significant play. Yes, and so yeah, there was definitely a team, but yeah, like I was definitely I was a significant part of it.
You became the face
Um,
for it for sure.
yes, I definitely did, and that's something. And I've always found it kind of funny. It is I run into people on the internet who think that I'm like way more important in this company than I am. It's like, you are the design director for EVE Online. Why did you do this, CCP Fozzie? Like, no. That's like multiple levels above me. But that just kind of comes from
Yeah. Well,
being publicly visible more than some other folks, just because this happens to be something that I'm relatively comfortable with, is like chatting with people on camera. Um, the As for the question of how happy I am with it, I mean, people get bored of hearing this answer, but I think it's an improvement of what came before. But I always wish to do more, and so I would love to do a bunch more iteration on it. But I mean, I'm working on a different area of the game right now, and that's my focus is over on events, and I'm really proud of the work that I'm doing in that. I just try to do the best work I can with whatever task I'm assigned.
thank you for that. Yeah, and to be fair, while lots of people like to give criticism of it, fairly frequently there'll be some big fight or some big conflict, not necessarily like the big war, but like between maybe lesser tier people, and they'll talk about it. And one of the comments that I'll see in Reddit, like every single time, is like, Fozzi-sov actually worked this time, as if like every single time they're surprised by this fact. But it, ultimately, I think it turned out to be, a source of some, angst, but overall pretty successful. But again,
Sov is both a really fun design challenge and a really tough design challenge because of the fact that it's a very open-ended multiplayer system that you often individual groups are going to be optimizing towards as much boredom for their opponent as possible. Uh, and that's not their like I'm not saying that's not something that's wrong for them. They're doing the correct thing. They're playing it well. Um, so yeah, it's a fun challenge. It's a tough challenge though. It's one of those like Mount Everest of multiplayer game design. And it's one of those things that I'm really happy I got a chance to work on an iteration of it, because it's a hugely cool design challenge to grapple with. But like, there's never going to be a be all end all. There's not. It's something I wish the best of luck to the next people that try to tackle that big challenge, and to the people after that, and to the people after that, and so on. It's one of those. We'll be writing about how to solve this kind of thing in textbooks 100 years from now as well.
yeah, and this is something that I like to say a lot on my stream, which is that, like, as much as we want to, it's easy to be in the stage and like throw popcorn at CCP and criticize what they've done in their choices. Video gaming is pretty new as far as like a thing, and
Yes.
online video gaming even more new. And I think that it really needs to be said that you guys are very much pioneering. Like, it can be easy after the fact to be like, psh. And I mean, even people can be on sissy and say this is going to be a problem and say told you so. But no matter what you do, there's going to be somebody who's saying something, and somebody's going to be able to say I told you so, and we don't actually know who it is until we get there. So
Yeah.
it is an incredibly difficult challenge, and so being that face was, I'm sure, not great for you. Hashtag Fire Fozzie and all that stuff. It seems like you've laid low a little bit since then. Has that been intentional?
There's parts of it that were great, parts of it not great. I think as a whole, we've maybe done a little bit less, uh, like putting devs out in the public eye over the past few years in general, which I think is probably overall the healthiest thing. This isn't like this kind of thing that we're doing right now. It's great, but it's not really a core part of of what being a game developer is. And so people that are good at game development aren't necessarily good at this, right? It's sort of a separate thing that has um, a different set of comfort levels. And so you definitely don't want to be like requiring your staff to be happy to do this or stand on stage at FanFest or things like that. And it can definitely, like, it can be really fun, but it can take out stuff out of you as well.
Yeah. And I mean, you came from the community, so it made sense for you to be kind of a face man. I mean, I agree that it was probably good for you to be out of the limelight for a little while and let things, the different people take on different roles and get known and whatnot. So that way we don't think that CCP Fozzie is the lead creative director of EVE Online or something like that. Um, I guess, man, I had one other thing I wanted to talk to you about before I let you go. Um, I guess one of the things I want to say before I close, I know that you really love the lore and all that sort of stuff. There seems to be a newfound interest in like not just engaging with the lore, but really going back and building up the foundations, as it were, of the lore, and making it accessible to people and making it interesting. One of the things that I keep going back to is like the old school stuff, the Eric Jalon project and all that kind of stuff. I stand by the fact that CCP still seems to be pointing us towards certain things and saying like there's more there's more to discover, especially in drifter hives and in Noikis and all that sort of stuff. Can you give any credence and weight behind that theory that like the puzzle box is still there and that it would be worth us to go and continue to experiment and push, and it's not just a waste of time and an abandoned feature? Is there something that we could discover that would like be like the amazing thing that CCP's been waiting for 5 to 10 years for somebody to figure out?
I'd say, I guess the best way I could say to put this is with story writing for a game like an MMO, there's a big improv element to it, where you are when you're writing any story for a game like Eve that is going to outlive your time at this company. The people who wrote stuff in 2008 are in a lot of cases different than people writing stuff now. You try to leave a bunch of cool options open, and you try to take advantage of where players are leading things. I guess going back to we were talking about how TTRPGs are different than video games. One area where they're kind of similar is writing storyline for a MMO is a lot like DMing. You're not or GMing. You're not necessarily knowing where everything's going. You're trying to make sure that there's a good framework to keep filling things in over time. So people shouldn't be expecting that there's some like giant grand plan that goes into extreme detail of stuff you haven't seen. But doing cool things in game, we will always be trying to do our best to reflect that in how the story goes. In the same way as like the fact that like Flowswin became a big thing was player driven, and then we've tried to tie that into the story. A lot of what happened with the Drifter and the Sleeper storyline and Wormholes was inspired by what players did with things like Archelon. So we try to feed off of what you guys do, and like have that be something where we're creating things that celebrate the cool things that players have made.
Yeah, and I think that the EOM story and a la Chakad and all that stuff with the with Flosiswin is a really, really good example of that, where in many cases the line between the story as it was intended and like it was EOM all along, like now I can go back and see like the 2 years, 3 years, 5 years of like story beats all coming back together, simultaneously knowing that many of those story beats were players just doing something and CCP just rolling with it. And so like, you're right. It was never like, nobody said 5 years ago, it wasn't like Chalkade is going to betray and it's going to be like the coolest thing ever. And we're going to launch a 2-week event out of it. Like that wasn't the point. Like there wasn't like, how are we going to do Capsuleer Day 2021? That wasn't where it all started, but it's like each piece is a natural progression of the last until ultimately the secret of the fact that Chalkade is this bad guy, which is the key piece that CCP knew the whole time and was able to piece all these pieces together, allows that story to unfold naturally. And I really like that. And so, yeah, it is about like, we don't know what pieces are important. And I don't know whether or not the Drifter Hive is going to do something, but I know that the more that we poke at it, the more likelihood that CCP will see that as the place to put the next thing, because they're seeing our interest in it.
Yeah, there's a lot of yes and in MMO narrative writing.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate that. And I think a lot of people really, really do. And I think that one of the things, as I said, one of the things that we've learned is both CCP and myself and the rest of the player base is just how important this is to these players. And, it is a promise, a two-way promise. There's a commitment and, whatnot. And when CCP engages and recognizes the player's stuff, it is truly transcendently magical, which is one of the reasons why when it feels like isn't followed through on, it can cause really negative emotions in something that otherwise should be seen as an incredible victory. So it's a big challenge, and you guys are working really hard to deal with it. Do you have anything that I had so much I want to talk about, and I don't even know if I covered all of the core mechanics of Resource Wars with how much we jumped into things. But can you think of anything that we might have missed before we go off?
I think, I mean, we covered a lot of stuff. We could obviously do like 5 more of these, and we wouldn't run out of stuff to talk about. But that's the great thing about a game like Eve. Um, yeah, I think that when it comes to like core takeaways, the big thing, I think we always want to encourage players to be curious about what other kinds of cool things are out there in a game in the game as big as Eve, and hopefully things like our events are going to help provide people that opportunity to try out new things. So if the idea of a group mining challenge is something that excites you, then I'd say give this event a try. It's going to be running until Thursday, June 3rd at downtime. If the idea of a 1v1 battleship duel seems fun to you, then there's going to be an event then that the weekend or the Saturday after that. And then we're going to keep doing cool things for different people all throughout the year and even beyond.
And at the very least, what we can say is people who pay attention, that actually do go through the effort to stay on top of things, to watch my show, to follow Fozzie and myself on Twitter, you will be rewarded. You know, like I went on a limb about this event and about its conflicted nature, and that was me reading the tea leaves. But at the same time, there's been plenty of times where we've seen something in which those who capitalized on it were able to make a lot of money because Eve, the living market, the living universe, these short time events, what it means is those who can capitalize on it can really, really, really reap the rewards. But it does take a little bit of extra work. It ain't as easy as just showing up with your mission running ship and running the same mission that's been running the last 18 years. And I think that's one of the things that has really kept me engaged with this as events and actually motivated me to make a show about the current news of a video game that's mostly about players, but not focused on the nullsec politics. Like there was no space for that until like a year or two ago. And a big piece of that is you and your events team making these things happen in the game all the time. So I really, really appreciate you coming on and talking. You've come on many, many times before. And like I said, I feel like this is like a heartbeat check-in between us at this point. And I also really appreciate the fact that this is the first time that I've gotten to check in with you without bugging you about an old man Stargate, because we got it, man.
Mm-hmm. We did got indeed.
We did it. And I really appreciate that. I know there was all these other workers. Who was the one that designed it?
Well, we've got a whole bunch of people went into it. We had like we have a number of people from the art team that did a really great job with modeling it and texturing it. And yeah, it's a like anything in a game this big, it's all a team effort.
Which leads me to my last thing, which is the thing that I warned you about ahead of time, and you thought I was going to forget, but I didn't. So you guys put in the old man Stargate.
Yes.
And that was part of 5 major landmarks that were all put in or updated at the same time. You said that there was a 6th site that was put in. And since then, there's been several hints about it. One, you said that you don't know if it'll be discovered right away. It's the kind of thing that you wouldn't be surprised if it was discovered within a few days. You wouldn't be surprised if it was discovered within took years. You also said that it didn't use a global beacon. That second one, I really wanted to circle back on with you. Does that mean that it is something that needs to be scannable? Is it something like if you were in the system, would you see the landmark? Would you even know what you were looking at?
You might not.
Okay.
So I'd say you would. It is not intended to be something that everyone that passes through the system will notice it. And obviously, if it was, then somebody would have noticed it by now. Anything that is going to be that obscure needs to be more well hidden than that.
That's fair. You said the system, so I'm assuming that it doesn't move.
It's in one place at a time.
Okay. Awesome. So Do you know if it's been found yet at all?
I'm not aware of it being found. It's possible somebody has found it and it hasn't come to our attention. It's the kind of thing that I would expect it would get discussed if somebody found it, like somebody would have said something about it. So as an interesting like kind of side thing, because I'm not gonna be able to go into, I'm not gonna give too many hints for this. One thing I mentioned before when we were getting ready for the show that I'll say again here, this is the kind of thing we might start giving more hints out in like a couple of years, if people haven't found it at that point. But we're not gonna give them any hints now. Um, back when another kind of similar thing, it's not the same type of thing, but similar in that we weren't sure how long it was going to take players to find it, was when Caroline Starr first entered the game. That obviously was a question of like hours of when it would get found.
Yeah.
But we were like watching Twitter and watching the forums and at the time to see who's going to find this. We actually had a betting pool internally of how long it was going to take people to find it. And the reason it's known as Caroline Starr now is because a
Caroline
character
Grace.
named Caroline Grace was out doing a further run and noticed it and tweeted about it, and that was the first person. Some other people might have seen it, but Caroline Grace was the first person to bring it to the public attention. And so it's possible somebody's found it, but I feel like somebody probably would say something if they found it. But
And that is actually a really interesting and a different, unique way in which we've put our names in the game, right? Like Caroline Starr is Caroline Starr because Caroline Grace. So, in that way, that's always going to be associated with them. So the popular theory right now is that it's Mithra's Gate. Do you want to speak anything to that theory at least?
I'm not going to say anything no about that.
All right, and no more. No,
and
we don't get one more
like,
hint.
I won't like respond to specific guesses because that would just get to you'd be able to like do it by process elimination if you did that.
That's
eventually.
fair. That's fair. Well, I mean, I guess the point is that like if it is Mithra's Gate, then knowing it's Mithra's Gate and finding it is two different things. And so some people are interested in knowing whether or not that's what they're looking for, but you're not even willing to give them that.
No, this we're not going to say what you're looking for with this. Again, maybe someday if people hasn't been found in a long time. Although this is one of those ones that I'm really happy for it to just be the kind of thing that like somebody finds 8 years from now and is like, hey, what's this? And like tweets about it or whatever has replaced Twitter by that point, and TikToks about it or something, and people then at that point when maybe everyone's forgotten about it, look back, oh yeah, somebody remembered there was this thing that was in the patch notes years ago, back in 2021.
And on
that
the
would
subject
be cool if that
on the subject of the other ones that you put in, the Trace Cosmos was referenced in the lore leading up to the Solitude Gate. In a weird way, the what is it? The Pool of Radiance could be potentially associated with the Stain, Santra. Like at first, it seemed like these were just cool places, but as time has gone on, it feels like it isn't necessarily an accident that you guys either put in these cosmic phenomena that was supposedly always there or updated them. Was there an ulterior motive that is starting to unfold, or is it just like these got put in and so now these are the things that are getting highlighted?
we're going to be putting in a lot of things, and we're always going to look for opportunities to tie them together when we can.
I like asking you questions because I'm always entertained by the answers. Thank you so much, CCP Fozzie, for coming.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a good time. We'll have to do it again soon.
Yes,
Oof.
definitely.
All right. Well, my son has been incredibly patient once again, as he has been. So we're gonna find somebody to raid, and I'm gonna go take care of that. I may have some I have 2 people that I'm supposed to be doing CSM interviews with, but again, when CCP Fozzie says, "Sure, we can set this up," I go, "You know what? I ain't got nothing else to do today, so let's go do this." So as please, anytime you want to come on the show, let me know, and we'll make it happen. I think that this was valuable because, again, getting this information out there to people so that way they can appreciate and enjoy this content at the highest level that they can and not have information be a barrier to entry, I think is incredibly important. And having people like you who's willing to come in and sit down and talk to me and deal with all of these issues and complaints and talking, questions is incredibly valuable to us. I use these chats for months from here on out in order to, understand what's going on. So thank you so much once again.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thanks for running this show and all the other content that you've put together over the years. I mean, I really appreciate it. There's elements of Eve lore that I reference on a regular basis that came to my attention years ago because of hydrostatic. So yeah, you're doing good work.
It's quite the legacy, and trying to live up to it at this in the modern era. Oh, it looks like Talking Stations is just getting started. Is that true? Yeah. Awesome. We'll probably raid over there. Let me message him just to verify, and then we'll head on over. If you want to respond to any other questions or say anything else before we head out, then that's
one
fair.
question that I could answer. One question that I saw in chat earlier, we didn't have time to answer at the time. There was somebody that asked about the way that tanks or modules are restricted for the 1v1 battleship proving ground that's coming up on the 5th. And the rule for that is going to be only one repairer module can be fitted. So either shield or armor, you can have one, not any more than that. And obviously that constrains fits in some really significant ways, but it's a constraint that everyone has to be on the same ground for, and I think it'll provide some pretty cool options for how to fit things. So that's the rule that's going to be in place there, and that just helps keep things from getting into like permatank stalemates. Also, you're not going to be able to bring in a ship in your frigate escape bay, so it has to be without that, and it's going to be Tech 2 modules as the limit. Somebody, Commander Codfluff, about the Zephyr. I actually have not taken the Zephyr out for a spin lately.
There's a graphical bug when you warp the Zephyr that he's a big fan of. You should give it a shot.
Yeah, it sounds like I saw earlier. It sounds like he submitted a bug report. Yeah. If so, absolutely thank you for that. Obviously, like there's a lot of people working on a project like this, and we'll try to get to it when we can, but I can't make any promises.
Excellent. And yeah, I just got confirmation that Talking Stations is just about to go live anyway, so we can raid on over there and keep the Eve news and content going. And that's
great.
Pretty awesome. Was there one other thing that I was thinking? I think that's it. So, and thank you. We had so many subs during this stream too. I appreciate all of you guys, CCP Convict, and all of the CCP guys. You guys also doing the CSM campaigns. Doing the interviews as well is really awesome, and I appreciate it. I think that this year has been a year of significantly increased engagement by the players in the lore, in the universe, in CSM, and I am happy to do my small part in helping out with that, and mostly because I feel so rewarded because it feels like everybody else is doing it too. Finally, for years I've been the one guy that's like, hey guys, faction warfare is cool too. Hey guys, the lore is interesting too. And it really feels like everything's starting to come together to let the player base really try to open up and appreciate how beautiful and wonderful this universe can be. And there's a lot of little reasons why that is. And people like CCP Fozzie, CCP Convict is one of, and CCP Swift are definitely part of that reason. So, all right, enough of that. Thank you guys. Until later, I'll see you in space.
every city.